Good evening and welcome to tonight's meeting of Burnside Council of August the 10th, 2022, opening at 7 p.m. Council is back in our pre-COVID horseshoe-shaped seating plan and we will be wearing masks by choice. The gallery is still seated out in the foyer because of the additional risk that we are having at the moment in relation to COVID. I welcome all those who are watching from home and of course all those who are in the gallery outside. Please remain silent and stand for the acknowledgements. We acknowledge that the land we meet on today is the traditional land of the Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the original custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still important to the Kaurna people today. We also pay respect to the cultural authority of Aboriginal people visiting and attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia. On behalf of the City of Burnside, I gratefully acknowledge and pay respect to those who sacrifice their lives for this country and its people. We also consider in our thoughts all those currently affected by war, especially in the Ukraine. Finally, we seek understanding and guidance in our debate as we make decisions that will impact on the lives of all who reside, study, work in or visit the City of Burnside. Grant us wisdom as we serve our community. Please be seated. Please be patient and respectful of each other as we get used to these arrangements again. I will be using the auto queuing system, so please use your button on your microphone and make sure you turn off your mobile phone before we start. Making sure that you do turn your microphone off when you've finished speaking, because otherwise the next speaker is not heard. We have a number of deputations tonight, so and a lot to get through. We only have two more this meeting and one more for all of our final decision making to take place, so I do encourage you to keep your questions succinct. And I will look now at declaration of interest. Apologies. We have no apologies this evening. We have no leave of absence. Declaration of interest reminder. Is there anyone who wishes to declare an interest? Not now? Okay. I will have a conflict of interest at the very end and I'll announce that at the time. Confirmation of minutes. I seek a mover. Thank you, Councillor Turnbull. Seconded by Councillor Piggott. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. I need to look at, I'm going to focus on this screen in front of me, not your hand signals, okay? But I didn't see anything on the screen, but then I saw hands. So, adjourned business, we have none. Public presentations, there's no public question time or presentations, but we have 6 deputations this evening, and they begin with Traffic Management Sydney Street Crossing and Armand Avenue, Mr Stephen Merritt. If you'd come forward, Mr Merritt, and please take a seat there at one of those seats there. And just turn the microphone towards your mouth a bit more. Yeah, that's it, better. Yeah. You can leave your mask on, that's fine. Or take it off as you wish. Okay. Yeah. So I have explained that 5 minutes with a bell at 4 minutes, and then stay for any questions. Just your name and suburb, not full address. Okay.
In Armand Avenue, where I've lived for 38 years. Mayor and councillors, thank you for the opportunity to revisit the issues that were raised in our petition and deputation in April regarding pedestrian safety, traffic management and abandoned shopping trolleys in Armand Avenue. The aim of this deputation is to provide an update on the actions undertaken by residents and to speak in favour of the recommendations that we gather you'll be voting on this evening as agenda item 11.4. A quick update, Armand Avenue is a narrow two-way street, 150 metres long, that runs from Kyle Street to the pedestrian crossing on Sydney Street at one of the entrances to Burnside Village. The speed limit's 50 kilometres an hour, dropping to 40 kilometres an hour just before the pedestrian crossing. Along one side there's resident permit parking plus 2-hour parking, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Our petition was in relation to 3 ongoing problems. Firstly, safety issues when using the pedestrian crossing on Sydney Street. Secondly, difficulties entering and exiting our driveways and navigating safely along Almond Avenue due to it being a narrow street, 2-way traffic, parking on one side and insufficient space for 2 cars to pass each other, compounded by unruly parking with vehicles parked across driveways, blocking vision of oncoming traffic, and also issues with vehicles parking over fire hydrants. Thirdly, hazards to pedestrians and parked vehicles from abandoned Coles shopping trolleys. In our deputation, we proposed the following solutions: improve pedestrian safety by installing flashing lights at the Sydney Street crossing, reduce parking and traffic flow issues by making Almond Avenue one-way, marking designated parking areas, and reducing the speed limit to 40 kilometres an hour. And also we sought to have a negotiated preventative response to the hazards posed by abandoned shopping trolleys. Now, in the 4 months since our deputation, we've done the following. We've contacted SA Water to request the yellow line marking the fire hydrant be repainted. We've contacted Council to request the marking of parking spaces. We've continued to report abandoned shopping trolleys to Coles via their website and shopping app, and we've reported parking infringements as suggested by Council staff. We can report the following outcomes. The yellow lines marking the location of the fire hydrant have now been repainted. Prior to the lines being repainted, there was a reluctance to issue infringement notices as the lines were not clearly visible. We sought an opinion from the Metropolitan Fire Service, who indicated that anything that impeded their access to fire hydrants would delay their ability to control a fire. Since the new lines have been installed, we know of at least 1 infringement notice that has been issued, and this provides some reassurance to us. A face-to-face meeting with David Hayes from the Traffic Management section has occurred, and this was a most welcome. It provided the opportunity to describe firsthand the problems faced by residents and the issues posed by uncontrolled parking in our narrow 2-way street, and also the complexities around reporting parking infringements. Now, while we would argue that the 2020 traffic statistics taken in the early days of COVID are not as relevant in 2022 and beyond, we do accept the rationale for not marking designated parking areas and agree that the proposed changes to traffic flow and parking will go a long way to resolving the issues of concern. The third issue, shopping trolleys, there's a glimmer of hope that Coles are collecting them more frequently, and we believe our reporting of abandoned trolleys and representations made by Council seem to be paying off, although experience has shown that this tends to come in waves and will probably need repeated action to keep the status quo, which is an improvement. In summary, having read the proposed changes outlined in 11.4 of the agenda and discussed with other residents of Almond Avenue, there is support for the recommendations that you have before you, and we would request that these be passed by Council. It is our belief that the installation of flashing lights at the Sydney Street pedestrian crossing, making Almond Avenue a one-way street, and reducing non-permit parking from 2 hours to 1 hour will go a long way to addressing the concerns raised in our earlier petition. Now, we understand that consideration of a reduction of the speed limit in Almond Avenue from 50 to 40 kilometres an hour is part of a larger review due to commence in early 2023. We would ask that our earlier requests for making Almond Avenue 40 kilometres an hour be considered at that time, and would welcome the opportunity to participate in that review. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Merritt. Any questions, please? No. Sorry, I'm looking at the screen. Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for coming along tonight. I'm wondering, you've been very thorough and very proactive residents in managing all the challenges you've got in that area right next to the shopping centre. Have you been briefed on the proposals for the Burnside Village upgrade, so that, because I know a friend of a friend lives in Sydney Street and
Okay.
Councillor Davey, is that relevant to the debate question tonight?
Yes, because it's to do with the traffic and the traffic flow and the noise for residents. So I'm just interested to see that they are aware of what's going on and have been informed.
I gather that work is due to start in September. there will be a large number of tradespeople needing to access the area, and that is bound to have an impact on traffic flow and traffic congestion. The specifics not aware of, other than it's due to start soon, and that is not going to make things better from our side, let alone Sydney Street. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Really appreciate your deputation. Right, now I call upon Mr. Jeff Fincher, Hazelwood Park Fencing. Please come forward.
Hello everyone. I'd like to start by thanking the Mayor and the Council for allowing me to comment on the Hazelwood Park fencing proposal that has been outlined in the agenda for tonight's meeting. By way of background...
Could you just restate your name and suburb, please?
Jeff Fincher, Hazelwood Park. Sorry. By way of background, my wife Janice and I have lived in Howard Terrace since 1996, and as former Melburnians, we think the natural beauty and open feel of Hazelwood Park, unencumbered by any excessive development or over-engineering, beats anything we ever saw in Melbourne, hands down. It's a truly beautiful park. My first comment on the proposal itself is that we would like to see more consultation with residents on the apparently updated proposal that appears in this evening's agenda notes. This is because the agenda version introduces several components that were not presented in the community engagement brochure that was circulated to residents in June this year. That June version simply showed renewed fencing around the Davenport Terrace car park, and we certainly agree that the permapine post and rail fencing there needs replacing. But at the time, we made no comment to the council. More specifically, the proposed residents have been invited to comment upon in June did not mention any investigation into the extension of fencing along Davenport Terrace, Howard Terrace or Greenhill Road, and we think that these fences would significantly detract from the beauty and the open field of Hazelwood Park. Much is made in the agenda notes about residential support for the June proposal, but had the greatly expanded fencing proposal of tonight's agenda been circulated, we suspect that you would have received many more responses. My wife and I certainly believe that bollards of the type around Newlands Park and other proposed fencing styles are not necessary for Hazelwood Park. Tonight's agenda papers also raise the issue of child safety and intrusion of cars into the park. In the 26 years we've lived on Howard Terrace, we've never witnessed a car run out of control into the park, nor heard of any children being injured in the car park. If we're wrong on this, that's fine, but we would like to see the data, and we'd like to see the data in a detailed evidence-based risk assessment plan that would allow us to make an informed decision, and we don't think we have that at the moment. We think the issue of traffic volume and average speed in Davenport Terrace and Hazelwood Park is actually a separate problem that can be easily solved, and we see no obvious connection with the fencing proposal. So in summary, we think the council should seriously consider paying residents the courtesy of circulating an updated and evidence-based proposal for comment. And we'd also urge council not to extrapolate the partial approval of the June fencing proposal to claim that residents approve the drastically expanded fencing proposal under discussion tonight. As it stands, our personal opinion is that the expanded proposal is unnecessary, probably overreaching, and most probably a waste of a good deal of ratepayers' money. Thank you.
I'm not sure if you were aware that the report that was requested by Councillor to come to tonight included possible proposals of future, but tonight's motion only deals with one specific issue, and that is the issue of the area that's replacing the pine fencing. That might help to explain some of your concerns.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess we're just worried about that this might be extrapolated. You know, the new marking of the fencing along Howard Terrace and Davenport Park, it might be seen to be part of the approval of the June brochure, the June community
The
engagement.
CEO would like to just speak to that.
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, I'm certainly happy to commit to yourself and to the meeting this evening that those other fencing locations would all be subject to separate community consultation.
Sure.
In no way would any extrapolation occur.
Okay, good.
Thank you. I don't have any... Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for coming along tonight. Just to clarify, you actually live on the most western side overlooking the swimming pool and that centre?
Yeah, we're opposite the swimming pool, yes.
Right. So your concern is what, that area, the fencing might, once it's accepted in one area, progress around to other areas of the park?
I think we think that bollards or fencing along that side of Hazelwood Park is really unnecessary, and we don't see the evidence that it's necessary, that is needed, and we would like to see that.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Okay, thank you.
I now ask for Mr. and Mrs. Kirshner? Or is it Kirshner? Kirshner,
Fine,
okay.
thank you very much.
Thank you. So you realise you have 5 minutes between the two of you?
Yes, certainly. Okay, good evening, Mayor, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm also here to discuss the fencing around Hazelwood Park. As a way of background, I've been a resident of Davenport Terrace, directly opposite the park for the last 26 years. Brought up 3 children, walked, played, ran, rode bikes in the park for all that time. Initially, I'm concerned with the community consultation process and the lack of responses you've received from your consultation process. A couple of salient points. I personally was not fully aware of the proposal that was put up, and I was speaking to 3 other residents on Davenport Terrace. 2 of them were aware of it, 1 didn't even receive the consultation notices. So there's been something go wrong there. From your survey, 260 people, only 17% responded. 13% were yes, but from the notes in the commentary and in the report, I don't think everyone fully appreciated what you were proposing. I think everyone agreed we want to get rid of the permapine post. That's not a problem, and that might have led to the yes votes that you've seen. However, on the back of 13% yes, I think it'd be a travesty to make this sort of move. Your risk assessment saying that there will be backlash from the residents, that 13%, I think can be easily dismissed by actually going back to the community and saying you want further consultation due to the minimal responses you've received on this proposal. The report you presented said 77% were happy with the proposal. I find that disingenuous when you're talking about 13% really, and the number of 34 people. And I don't fully agree or don't think those 34 people fully understood what was going to happen. As I said, I'm happy to replace the permapine post, but I don't want to create a precedent by putting a long fence along the Davenport area where we look at. The fence around the playground was necessary, no doubt about it all. The area of interest we're talking about tonight, as you said, Mayor, is Section C, but let's not create a precedent. The risk assessment, the report says there's 2 areas of concern: vehicles going onto the park, which we can easily get around with bollards and or replicating what you've got there now, and children. And I just wonder how many reports have had of children and issues within that park, the car park I'm referring. If there is issues, why are there not more signs? Why are there not more speed humps? But the speed of cars coming off Howard Terrace going down through and basically driving to our front yard out on Davenport Terrace, the speed of cars is minimal. So I just think we need to have a look at that and work out properly what we're trying to achieve. And as I said, this looks like a proposal where you've taken a sledgehammer to a nut, basically. Why was only 1 alternative given in the survey? Why were we not given 2 or 3 different alternatives? Is there something we're missing out on here? We all agree that the park's got to be protected, that's no problem. The children we need to be looked after, that's no problems. But then you go and say, let's leave holes in the fence. This proposal's got holes in the fence for children to walk through. So you then extrapolate that further in the proposal. Why haven't we got a fence all the way around Rymewell Park? Why isn't there a fence down at Victoria Park where you've got a drive-through car park and kids on there every Saturday and Sunday? this just seems to be over the top. My first suggestion is go back. If you want to put this proposal to the ratepayers, then do some photoshopping. Put some 3 or 4 different diagrams, different proposals, so that we can actually look at it properly and vote on it. The original consultation had 1 photo, and that's very poor. There is absolutely no effort gone into this proposal. It actually looks lazy. So my suggestion is go back to the community, get some photoshopped photos of what you want to propose, and then have a look at it properly. As I've said, this is taking a sledgehammer to a nut. You've got one of the great assets in Adelaide called the Burnside Park, Hazelwood Park up there. Let's not destroy it. The open feeling, the beauty of it will be destroyed by putting the fences around. And if we create a precedent by putting these fences down to the bollards or down to the gate and then further around the park, you destroy the ambience of that park. This is a big decision. You need to have a really good think about it, because we have got one of the great assets in Adelaide. I want you to look after it. Thank you.
Okay.
Just quickly up 30 seconds.
I know. But having said that, everything that my husband has said, I totally agree with. And we've had children and they're using it all the time, and I want the park to look nice. I don't want a barrier. I don't want it fenced off. I want it inviting, and I want people to be able to get out of their cars and go straight into the park, or drive up and be able to see in the park. If you drive up there with the barrier, the proposed barrier, you're going to have it at eye level. You're not going to be able to see in. And it is a hindrance to the beauty of the park. So I propose a lower fence.
Finish the sentence.
Thank you.
Fence.
I propose a lower fence like what's already there, the permapine, like my husband said. Thank you.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much for coming along tonight to let us know what you're feeling. Do you think that the permapine actually needs a replacement? Or do you think the vehicle stops that are there, that have been installed at the car parking spaces in the newly laid car park, is adequate to stop the cars going into the park?
Look,
just an interest for someone who...
Both the permapine and the stoppers have worked. I don't recall in 26 years of living there seeing a car doing donuts on the park. But I do think the little low fences like that will provide a little barrier that if there was a child, there is just that little bit of stopping spot and then the cars can't get on there full stop. So I'm more than happy with that. The proposed environmentally friendly posts are fantastic. If you're going to start putting bollards around, always remember to have a little cap on them like that. You never have flat posts where people leave their drinks in their cans, and you can use that in other areas of the park. I've done a few fences for different things, so they work.
And the permapine is looking pretty daggy.
Correct.
Councillor Henschke?
Oh, thank you. Good evening. I'll take this off. Oh, right. Have you, in 2016, did you provide input into the Hazelwood Park Conservation Management Plan? It says here that there was extensive community consultation in 2016. I don't know if you remember.
No.
Back in 2016.
No.
Okay. Did you know that plan, the Conservation Management Plan, in our papers says that fencing, barriers and entrances enhance the identity of the park and provide safety and security for park users? And then it goes on, this Conservation Management Plan says, did you know that it says that I'm asking, did you know that it says the Conservation Management Plan is, I'm asking the residents, excuse me, Councillor Davis, you're interrupting me. Well, I'm asking a question of the residents. Do you know that the Conservation Management Plan says that fencing and barrier opportunities they mention this fencing along Greenhill Road and the fencing along Howard Terrace in this Conservation Management Plan? Do you know about this Conservation Management Plan?
I've read that in this information you provided now.
Yes.
And I thought, and then we've seen what
Yes.
the picture with all the dots and all the...
Yes.
Okay, so no, I wasn't aware at the time.
Right.
But I have read it here, and even some of this commentary in the report that's been tabled here is over the top. And it keeps talking about bicycle traffic being kept off the park. I'm just not sure who did this report, but it's targeted two things, which was children in vehicular traffic. No problems at all. They talk about putting, as you know, the fence along Green Hill Road. How many people park on Green Hill Road? How many people enter the park from Green Hill Road? All the parks, all the kids are parked on Howard Terrace and Davenport Terrace. You know, we've now got a set of traffic lights, pedestrian lights to cross, so that if people walk, which is not driving, they're walking into the park. Even that Green Hill Road, if you think about what that would look like from this Hazelwood Park Conservation Management Plan,
Yep.
you just shake your head.
Yep.
You go, who's doing this? Who's destroying our park? So, no, I didn't see that back in 16. I've read it all here in this report and I can't believe
Right, thank you for answering my questions.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just following up on your comments, are you aware that it's a state heritage listed park? And
Yes.
two, are you aware that, would you be happy if any changes are proposed that you are able to make comment on in community consultation? And do you have any suggestions for that community consultation, for any changes in the park to fencing and whatever?
Councillor, I'm hoping that people listening to us right here and right now, that we're concerned with the initial proposal, Section C, and then what, as in the rest of the report, there's permapine posts, there's hedges, all around the park, all around Howard Terrace, as you know, and Green Hill Road. Along that sort of lines, this needs to go back to the community, because that will destroy the look of Hazelwood Park. And to the point of putting bollards this high, what sort of car is going to drive through that? You just need bollards this high. If you need to put bollards anywhere, why would you waste the money of paying double the price for a bollard this high, as you've done in Newland, where you can actually have a bollard that high and it will do exactly the same thing? As I said before, this report has been poorly written. Someone hasn't given much thought. There is no alternatives for the community and residents and ratepayers to actually have a look at it properly and have alternatives to discuss. So that's where I'd be heading. I think Part B, which is Section C, needs to go back to the drawing board for starters. And before you, Mary, you've already said, though, you won't be progressing further. The CEO won't be progressing further, which is fantastic, because you really do need to have a look at this properly and consider how you're going to destroy the park. And that's what will happen.
Councillor Cornish?
Thanks. Just a couple of questions. From your property, do you have a high fence, or do you have a fence that you can see through into the park?
We've got a hedge fence. We stand on a veranda, can see straight into the park.
You can see straight
into
in.
the park.
So from your property, you can see straight into Hazelwood Park, and that you don't really want it to destroy the views and
Correct.
stuff like
So,
that.
Councillor, we're on the corner of Hillstowe. So when you drive out you come in on Howard Terrace, you drive through there, and you come out onto the exit onto Davenport Terrace. That's our house with the Christmas tree in the front yard and the hedge. You drive straight out the front yard. So we look straight at the park whenever we're at the front. And look, just this other factor of how many cars go up and down that street every day. I counted the cars on Saturday morning. There was 20 cars went up there in 2 hours, and your report says something like 490 in a day. So unless you drive up and down there at night, where these figures come from, even that's disingenuous.
Well, the next question that I do have is, you've made a comment about, the consultation and needs to be better, and you obviously haven't participated. How would we get you to participate in community consultation in future?
Councillor, that's a very good question, and I must admit we're all busy, live busy lives, and I just think when I saw that initial proposal, it went over my head, and that's why I'm saying you've got to put alternatives there. It's got to be highlighted. Hey, we're making I keep going back to the fact this is an asset that people kill for in interstate. We've got one of the great assets in Hazelwood Park. So I would have been going along and knocking on every single door along Davenport and Howard for starters and saying, you guys need to have a look at this. But that's just where I'd start, because it directly affects us, as you're suggesting. We look straight out of front door at that park, and we're thrilled with what we've got across the road.
Thank you very much for coming in.
All right, thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen.
Our next deputation moves its focus to 6 Tusmore Avenue fencing in Leabrook, and I call upon Jeff and Lorraine Worth, please.
Are we able to remove?
Yes,
Okay,
take
thanks.
your microphone, your mask off, that's fine.
Okay. What we're here to do is to support the motion that Jane prepared the other day I presume most of you have read this. It's about fencing, the erection of a fence down the end of our court. Lorraine and I have lived in Kooyong Court for over 30 years now. We came here several years ago when they wanted to pave the court. I don't know if any of you remember that, but we wanted the court to remain in its natural state, which in the end the council didn't go ahead. So basically we don't have a lot to say. We support what's in this email that I received from Jane, which sets out some of the feelings of the people. So there's not a lot. It's basically up to the council, as I see it, to decide on whether, you know, a fence is erected. I don't know if you've got much to say.
Did you wish to add anything?
Sorry?
So just asking if your wife wanted to add anything.
I will say something. It's a lovely little reserve, and I occasionally took my grandchildren down the bottom, you know, and have a little picnic because it was further away from our home, and it was just a lovely little space. But now there's a building with a complete wall of glass. So, you know, no one would be able to really go down there. And plus, the people from Woolworths would occasionally come over and have their lunch in the reserve, but they feel that they can't do that anymore because of the intrusion that it would be. So it's just changed the whole reserve, in our opinion.
Thank you. Councillor Davey?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for coming along tonight. I included the photo that you gave me, which was the reserve before the subdivision and the development took place 5 years ago, when the Swetijewski's house was, and
it was
5 new
completely
blocks.
fenced.
That's right. So are all the other properties that back onto the reserve fenced
Yes.
and
Every
no
one of
problems?
them, yeah, all down Stanley Street, and the 2 new buildings that have gone on the end of Stanley Street, they've got fences. So we just feel it's changed the whole perspective of a lovely reserve.
And so what, in terms of loss of your access to it and your aspect of it, because I would imagine you're one of the most affected, looking straight onto it.
Looking straight down, you are. There was a lad sitting behind, there's a palm tree down there somewhere, and I happened to go out the front to bring the garbage bin, and I said, what's that down there? But it was a lad sitting behind a tree because he didn't want to be seen.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, we look at privacy, and we look at the fact that we don't want to be looking into a, BMW Motors on West Terrace there, where you have big glass windows, and I know that's a personal thing, but it's not just us. We're here to speak on behalf of the
Everyone
residents.
in the street,
As I said, it's only a fence, but it's amazing what, you know, before they wanted to pave it, and they said, right, no, we agree, but, you know.
I was just going to ask a follow-up question in terms of the people who face on, there's about 8 homes, including yours, who face on, so the cul-de-sac is your front fence and garden, and so, and you're lucky enough to have that small reserve, so you actually, you've got nowhere else to go. Some of the other people back onto it. So what's your main concern about the wall, the window? Is it that people are watching you, or that you can see them, or is it?
No, we can't really
There's
see
probably
them.
a bit of everything, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I walk down the shop twice a day because I buy Lorraine a coffee and myself a coffee because I get bored at home. And, you know, you just feel like when you've got a camera down the other end that's picking up every move that you make, and people gawking at you, and then, you know, I mean, that's only minor, but, I mean, I don't want to start a war or anything here. It's just, you know, I've come in here, both of us, to say we support the proposal that you've put through for the 50-50 split on the fence. We believe it's appropriate, and we believe the court should be returned to its natural state.
Thank you very much, both of you, for coming in.
Okay, thank you.
I'll now call upon Dr. and Mrs. Martin, also of Leabrook. So again, you have 5 minutes between
Yes,
you.
I'm Lynn Martin from Leabrook. This is my wife, Jo Martin, from Leabrook as well.
Good evening.
I'm going to read this statement, and Jo will answer the questions. Our house on Stanley Street backs onto Kooyong Court Reserve, and we walk through it daily and use it for games of bocce when friends and relatives visit. So we support Councillor Davies' motion for the installation of a fence between the rear of 6 Tusmore Avenue and the reserve. After the removal of the previous house and its abundant vegetation on the corner of Tusmore Avenue and Stanley Street, we hope that the new house at 6 Tusmore Avenue would have a fence with abundant vegetation growing on the reserve next to it. Instead, we have a wall of glass windows and sliding glass doors with no vegetation. To make matters worse, the new occupants have colonized. They've colonized a significant proportion of the reserve, and indeed the best part of the reserve, by treating it as their own backyard. This began during the building process when, despite regulations to the contrary, the reserve was treated as a building site with trucks delivering building material through the reserve rather than via Tusmore Avenue. Then they planted new grass in the area adjacent to their house, watered it, and hired someone to mow it, just as if it was their own backyard and not council property. After the completion of the house, we had other issues which we had to work through. Some have been resolved, some haven't. The children played in the reserves at times, greatly disturbing the elderly residents, some even older than us. And they left their bikes, balls, and other playthings in the reserve, just as if they were in their own backyard. And a basketball hoop was put up on a palm tree, and a volleyball net was strung between 2 trees. Not only have the new owners colonized the reserve, they have also alienated it from other residents and from other members of the public who are entitled to use it. We know of no one around the reserve who approves of what has happened. Everyone opposes it. We know of no one who would feel comfortable using the part of the reserve that they have colonized. And we are speaking for these people. And as a result of the colonization and the alienation, we residents feel sad, angry, and cheated by the loss of what was once a lovely, quiet spot that was Kooyong Court Reserve. And we accordingly support Councillor Davies' motion.
I would like to thank the council for giving us this opportunity, and to say that we talk to just about everyone else in around the reserve, and they were all quite distressed and puzzled at what was happening. Well, several of them are much too old to do anything about it. There are at least 2 owners that are in their 90s, and other people, there were some other people that were might have come this evening, but they're in a COVID restriction. So, yes, so there is significant feeling against what's happening, it's very hard to treat that space naturally anymore. You can't just walk down the grass and enjoy the quiet ambience because you might be being watched. You know, it's that feeling of being observed potentially all the time that you're in that area. And that it's actually been taken over anyway. It's been treated as a backyard, and the people around that court do not owe these people a backyard.
Thank you. Councillor Davey?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you very much for coming along tonight and outlining your concerns. The other issue that has been mentioned to me that hasn't been mentioned tonight is that people have been filmed in the reserve. Is that allegedly so, or do you feel that you're part of CCTV?
We know that the gentleman concerned showed his surveillance apparatus to one of the people around the reserve.
Okay.
Councillor Turnbull?
Thank you for your input. I'm just wondering, do you have a gate in your back fence leading onto the reserve?
Yes.
Do your neighbours?
Sorry, I didn't...
A gate, yes.
Yep. So most people along there do?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, that was all.
Right, well, thank you very much for coming in this evening and
Thank
doing
you.
your deputation.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Now we have one further deputation, and that is from Luca and Amy Mattiazzo. On the same item. Please have a seat.
Is this on? Yes, it is. Good evening, all. It's a real honour to be here in front of you all. Thank you for letting me speak. Luca Mariazzo, my wife Amy Mariazzo, we're the residents at 6 Tusmore Avenue. I don't have all that much to say, apart from just reiterating from the report what the CEO's comments that legally there is no legal right that I have to put a fence, and I guess this was made aware to me during the planning stages. Obviously, you're aware that there's a tree of significance at the front, and we had to do a lot of jumping through hoops to try and get the design to accommodate, and so we had to really shift the house right to the back. And me and my wife actually had a meeting with the planner to discuss, well, what are our requirements facing the reserve, and it was the planner's suggestion saying that, well, no, you don't have to put a fence. And so, you know, as a result, we ended up designing our house accordingly. Had we known that a fence was needed, obviously the design of the house would have been very significantly different. So I guess, you know, being aware that if you are to force me to put a fence, apart from it, there's no legal need for me to do that. It sets a precedence for all those other properties that don't have fences facing the reserve, and just, you know, the legal ramifications from our perspective, from our house design, I guess it's worth taking into consideration. But I guess, why are they personally attacking us when all the other houses along there, yes, it's their front yard, but it's their living space facing the same reserve as ours? Bedrooms, living rooms, all of those houses face the same reserve. Why are they attacking us? So I just wanted to bring to your attention about what happened on the 6th of May 2019 when we were building. Lynn Martin already sort of mentioned that, but he came and started complaining about the location of the truck in the back street, and my father confronted him, and then before you know it, they had an altercation. It started getting a bit pushy, and ever since then, the Martins have had a personal vendetta against us. And so ever since then, they have tried everything to try and make our life difficult. So that is the reason. And I just wanted to bring that to the attention of everyone. I mean, if there's actual legal substance to having a fence there, I would understand. I mean, there's all those other points that I can go through and have a counter-argument, very strong counter-arguments, but I'm not going to go there because it really comes down to there's all those other houses. Why isn't he complaining about all those other houses? It's just, so that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Did your wife wish to add anything?
Sorry, yeah, just also another point. Since those photos were taken, pots have been put up. It's something we've been working towards, and plants will be planted in them, which we expect to grow rather high. It wasn't that we were just leaving it as is. There are now pots along both sides, which will have garden trees.
And act like a fence.
Yeah.
To the backyard.
We just hadn't got around to it yet.
Thank you. Councillor Lemon.
Yes, thank you. I've got a question. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your presentation. Do you know of other new people in your street? Are you some of the newest people in your street? It sounds like a lot of people have lived there almost their entire lives.
I would say we are one of the newer ones, yes. Well, there is the one opposite us on the corner, Bob and Di, and we have a great relationship and they have no complaints about us. We have a great relationship with Fran. If anything, she said, I hope you're not putting a fence there because I just love it. I've had the other elderly saying they just love hearing our kids playing out in the reserve for these old people. It's just we've really given vitality. And when you look at the pictures before we were there, the grass was dead. It was completely barren, weeds growing. It was terrible. We've made it lively now. And yeah.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thanks very much for coming along tonight. I just wanted to ask a few questions about the fact that the back area is what is in contention, and you're talking about the other residents overlook the reserve. Do you realise that's their front address? Their address is on the cul-de-sac, and they don't have fences because that's how it was developed when that land was subdivided. So those 8 or 9 houses that are overlooking the reserve, that is their front garden, and you have a front address on Tusmore Avenue. So there is quite a big difference between actually living on the cul-de-sac and overlooking the reserve and backing onto it. Are you aware of the difference with that?
So, yes. But as we said, legally, I don't have to have a fence. But the point that they brought up is when they're there, there's no privacy. But the windows are all facing that same reserve, whether it's the front or back, makes no difference. So they can't use it as an argument considering all the houses are facing the same reserve.
I think that the point that's been made to me is that there's this huge plate glass window that's intrusive.
Councillor Davey, question please.
Just leading to that. And that's the difference. People don't have those. All the other houses that back on Stanley Street, the other new houses, all have a colour-bond fence with a gate and back onto the park. But the other issue that's been raised by more than one person is that people are being filmed when they're in the reserve, and that's a great concern that people are subject to CCTV scrutiny. Do you have any comment on that?
Before I answer the question about the security camera, my wife wanted to ask that.
Just with regards to the back area, so when we built the house, we have the tree of significance in the front. So when we designed it with the planner, it was to close in the front to Tusmore Avenue. So we have the 2-metre fences all around, which was to behave like a backyard so that we would have that living ratio to garden. So that's why they approved that we would have that opening to the reserve, so it would act like our front yard.
Yeah, so in actual fact, our front yard is technically our backyard.
Yeah.
It's closed, and that's the open living area space which approves. In regards to the security, So it only sort of points down, and we were contacted by the police because there was a robber who stole a lot of things from people's front yard, and the police contacted us, well, one of the neighbours' friend, and asked if they could borrow some footage. And in actual fact, we saw the robber coming. When they looked at the camera, he straight away turned, asked his other colleague, and they ran off. So if you were to tell the neighbours, it's actually helped because that camera has made that whole cul-de-sac a lot more safety. So.
Is that actually legal?
Yes.
Councillor Cornish?
The tree of significance,
yes.
Can you tell me, is it significant how old, what variety of tree it is that forced you to realign the house?
It's a river red. It's about 150, 200 years old. Technically, along all counts, it's not significant tree, but the council wouldn't let us touch it.
Thank you.
Councillor Davis?
I'm over here. I think you can appreciate the difficult position we're in. You've had 4 deputations come and say that they feel that they can't access the reserve and use it, and that you're encroaching on its use. And you said before that, well, they're just making stuff up and they have a vendetta against you. I mean, what can you do to actually address those concerns, taking them at their highest, if it's not to put in a fence?
Well, once again, we've put in those pots now. That's been our aim from the start with the decking. We've put in the pots. We plan to plant quince trees, like put espalier them, to create a boundary across there. And they're there already, the pots, where we can't find plants at the moment.
So how tall are the pots? Like how wide, how far apart are they, and how significant are the trees?
They're 500 high, I think the pots are, 500 to 600 high, and then we're going to be putting trees which are probably another metre.
The trees should grow to about 1.5 metres.
Okay. Can I ask one more question?
And you said espaliered, so they're actually going to be spread laterally
we'll
as
put
well.
the wire across. We don't want to encroach on the reserve, obviously, so we'll make them go wide.
But just making sure everyone understood what you were saying when you're saying espaliered.
All right.
Councillor Davis, yes, you can ask a
Just
subsequent
one
question.
more question. You said that you essentially reversed the layout of your house. What is in the room behind the black glass door area?
Our living area.
Your living area. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davey?
Thank you. Just finally, what else can be done to work through with the neighbours so that you can share the space and everyone feel comfortable using it? That's what I'd like to see, and that everybody's happy to use it. It's such a lovely tiny little reserve. The staff have just planted a whole lot of...
Councillor Davey, can you make your question and relevant to the debate for later this evening?
The staff have just planted a whole lot of plantings, which the residents asked for a couple of years ago because they all died in the drought. Do you feel there's anything you can do to help, or that I can help you do, so that you can all live together and use the reserve and respect each other's privacy? That's what I think would be the best.
We've just spent close to $2,000 with these pots and the plants to espalier to provide a fence, which is more than what the neighbours, because if you look, neighbours down there, it's just the post with the wire anyway. So what we're providing is more than, it's going to look beautiful, and as I said, still more than what most people have in their front yards.
Councillor Henry?
Oh, good evening. Hello. Hi. Thank you for coming in. So just clarifying, what we can see in our report here, that window, that's the front of your house. That's the front door area? That black window, that's the front door, basically. Is that the front door?
Well, it is the back of our property.
Back of your property, so you come in, that's the front, where you enter the house, that's the front?
No, that's on 6 Tusmore Avenue.
It is, the front door is on 6?
Correct.
Yes. Okay, so that's like a back door. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Councillor Pickett?
Hi. You've been very patient with us, but I'd just like to go a little bit further. You talked about, in the report here, it talks about you suggesting, I think, around privacy window film. You know, and your answer to Councillor Davis in regard to the pots, and that's definitely going in the right direction. It'd be great when you can get some quince trees. What did you mean by that? Is that an option that works for you that potentially moves this further towards the middle as well? I don't quite understand. I need you to explain it to me perhaps, but whether that's still an option.
You know, we want to be accommodating as possible, and if that's going to appease them, you know, we will consider it. It's not going to really affect us in any way.
But like they said before, the seeing in isn't actually the problem. I think they're more concerned about us seeing out.
Right, yeah, no, that's right. So it's probably not a practical, yeah, no, fair enough. Thank you. Cheers.
Councillor Jones.
Sorry, you might not know the answer to this question, but is this road reserve or community land that you're bordering against?
Yes. As in...
Road reserve?
Yeah.
Through Madam Mayor, if I can refer that to Mr Cant, he might be able to give us some insight.
Through your worship, it's community land.
Thank you very much for coming in. We appreciate everybody's deputations tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been an experience. Thank you.
Now, we don't have any petitions, but before we move on to reports and we discuss the order in which we might debate these, I just want to make a few little announcements. I would normally do them at the very end, but I'm just concerned we might run out of time, and one of the announcements actually relates to one of our elected members who's present now and might not be here later. First of all, there's a resignation has come through from Sue Ross, who is the director of Eastwood Community Centre, and I have written to her. She finishes up this Friday, and she has been replaced already, and I just wanted to inform the council that she is leaving the business after 8 years of amazing devotional service, and as I said, I have written to thank her on behalf of the council already. Second one is the very sad news of the passing of the stalwart of the Rotary Club of Burnside, and that is Tanya Dalton. And Tanya and her husband Brett were the major setter-uppers, I guess you'd call it, for all of the markets at the hub, and she died very suddenly last weekend. And so our sincerest sympathies go to, and I know Mr Cooper has sent flowers already to Brett, and that is a very sad loss because they provided extraordinary service to that particular group. My third one is actually a more positive one, and that is a congratulations to Councillor Davis on achieving or receiving a National Firefighters Award last 2 weeks ago. And that award, of course, was provided to those people who fought the fires in 2019, both here in South Australia and interstate. So thank you very much, and I commend you on that service. So normally that would be at the end, but I just wanted to do this earlier tonight. Okay. Now I would like some direction as to how you would like to handle. We do have only 2 people left in the foyer, and they are in relation to the motion on notice. So my suggestion is we go through the reports as they are in the order on the agenda, unless you have any objections. Yes. Right. So yes, there is only the one motion on notice that we've had a deputation about. Okay, so I'm going to first of all seek anyone who wishes to. Yes, but it's only one. Councillor Davey. 11.1. Is there anyone who wishes to withdraw? Councillor Davey. 11. Oh, sorry, I should be using the buttons. So 11.2. Councillor Dawes. 11.3. Councillor Pickett. 11.4. Traffic Management, Sydney Street. Councillor Davey. Sorry. Okay, Councillor Lemon. Makes more sense. 11.5, report on the Code of Conduct legal costs. Councillor Davis. Mayor's activity report. seek someone to move that. Councillor Cornish, seconded Councillor Henschke. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Era Water Board minutes. Councillor Henschke, are you withdrawing? Or moving?
Moving.
Moving it. Seconded by Councillor Hubel. I saw your hand go up, but a bit late. Okay, Councillor Cornish, you've seconded it. All those in favour? Against? Carried. All right, so now we'll go back to Councillor Davey, 11.1, Hazelwood Park.
Could I ask that we move that we do 13.1 first, if the people are still here?
No, we've had a chance to do this. We already raised that issue and we've decided to move on.
Sorry, I didn't realise that you were... Thank you. I have an alternative motion. Have you got my alternative motion? I sent it through to you and Chris. As I was instructed to do. Yes, I've sent it through.
Send it to Chris, right?
Yes, Chris and Helen.
And Helen.
Why do we have this palaver all the time? Shit, why do we have to do this?
Yeah, to me.
Why do we have to go through this every time? I know, I'm just trying to find it. Oh, this is so nerve-wracking, as if I don't have enough.
Oh, she's got it. She had it. Well, she's found it.
So my motion is that, shall I proceed? That council receives and notes the assessment and analysis of fencing throughout the Hazelwood Park Reserve. No, it's not.
This is not yours.
Ah. Okay, I'll start again. Council receives and notes the assessment and analysis of fencing in Hazelwood Park Reserve. And 2, does not progress with installation of any additional fencing in Hazelwood Park unless justified by detailed risk assessment, and any proposal is subject to state heritage assessment and detailed community consultation. Thank you. So, as we've heard tonight, and more broadly within the community, this has become quite concerning to many of the local residents, because the proposal for the post and rail fencing, which has been currently approved for the protection of the playground users, the proposal is that this be extended along the park frontage facing the Davenport Terrace side of Hazelwood Park to the boom gates, and it came out of the blue. It wasn't really planned and scheduled. Hazelwood Park has been a state heritage registered site since the 11th of May 1995, and this requires approval of the Department of Environment for any development on the park. There's no evidence that this type of fencing is needed. There have been no incidents between cars and children causing injury along this stretch of the car park. And this update was given to me as recently as 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, when I asked the staff for any incidents recorded. So there have been none, and as we've heard from the residents who live opposite, there's been no incidents to justify installing such a large intrusive fence. and there's no justification to, I mean, it's worked beautifully around the play space, which means there are lots of children coming and going with parents loading and unloading them into cars. It's absolutely fine there. And it was approved here for that space. It's, however, bulky and intrusive and not designed to complement the heritage park status of Hazelwood Park. In any other location, I believe community consultation was, should have been, I believe community consultation was undertaken in June in a reactive way to this. As we've heard today, it was confusing. The residents were not clear about what was intended and what was proposed. There were no options to the consultation. And as I understand, the fencing had already been purchased at a cost of $40,000, and the consultation was retrospective to this proposal. The permapine fencing is no longer needed as car stops. It's very old, dilapidated, it keeps getting knocked off, and it's not effective as a car stop. And these ostensibly have been fitted to the park to prevent entry to it itself. So it's worthwhile, as staff have said, to remove those. I really don't think we need any fencing. I think there's no justification to spend the money on such intrusive fencing. If we really did need fencing, as was pointed out tonight, low bollards would do, I think would do the job, as are installed in many other parks around Burnside. But we also have the heritage status of the park, and that needs to be contained. There is actually, if we've already purchased the fencing, and I certainly don't want to waste this amount of money, there is a location that I can suggest on Rochester Avenue in Leabrook, opposite numbers 44 to 50, where the Second Creek runs through, and where there is a new fence needed to protect in a fall on an escarpment between pedestrians and the roadway. So there's a very old dilapidated metal fence there, and I'm sure that this post and rail fencing could be fully utilised in that situation if we really need to utilise that post and rail fencing. But I think this is not necessary. I thank the staff for their concerns and their keenness to protect the park, but I really don't think that this is necessary at this stage and would be not the best use of our resources. So I hope that you support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Dave.
I don't really understand the motion. Does that mean that B, C and D go ahead?
I understood this was a complete replacement motion.
Yeah, but it says that does not progress unless detailed risk assessment indicate a need for new proposals. So that we do have a risk assessment of moderate, high and moderate. So would you not, I guess, wouldn't the administration interpret this to proceed B, C, D?
I've only got 1 and 2.
Because it says unless detailed risk assessment indicates there is a need, and the administration has said there is a need.
It's additional fencing. The fencing's already there, so it doesn't say to stop replacing fencing.
Can we get the CEO to respond rather than one of us respond, please?
Yeah, through Madam Mayor, can I just ask Mr. Count how you're interpreting that motion before you?
Because the permaplane's getting replaced, right?
Through your worship, as it's written, it technically says a risk assessment and a consultation process, which we have done for the section between the existing fence and the bollards, and then subject to state heritage assessment, which it would be through the development application process anyway. So subject to that proceeding, I would proceed with installing that fence because it was supported through consultation. With respect to the rest of the fencing around the park, each one of those would be subject to all 3 of those considerations, including consultation as discussed in the report, but it is consistent with the CMP that's been developed.
Sorry, so which sections? C and B?
Just to confirm, C would be the only section that would go ahead just now.
Okay.
I think that some of those deputies this evening were completely confused in light of whatever information that they read into that report, because the report clearly stated that this fencing only relates to that area from the Wombat Waterhole playground to the boom gate, which was subject to a previous discussion and debate in this council chamber. And as a result of that, there was a request to get a report on potential additional fencing, which is what we have received.
Okay.
But the motion the original motion related only specifically to that piece of fencing, and that's what the consultation went out as. The consultation was posted in the park. It was also distributed to every house around that area, and you have seen the results of that consultation.
Thank you, that's very helpful, Your Worship.
Could I just add a couple of, because that's not the intent of my motion.
Well, I think that's part of the problem.
The intent does not progress installation of any additional fencing to the current fencing. So what I'm saying is there's fencing there at the moment, and this is proposal for new fencing. I'm saying don't install that new fencing.
Right,
No.
so your motion is directly opposite to the motion that stands as a recommendation from council.
Yes.
But what Mr. Cant has already said is that they have already consulted with the community about that particular zone of fencing, and that's all that was supposed to be consulted with the community, and that the risk assessment has been done and it's in the documentation, and that subject to any fence being constructed, from what I heard, it has to be approved by State Heritage anyway. So all of point 2 appears to me to have been covered in the original report.
No, that's not what's intended. It's that there's no fencing there at the moment, so this would be additional fencing in Hazelwood Park. It's not there at the moment. It's been bought, but it hasn't been installed.
No,
so that's the intent.
But there is a permanent pine fence there which needs to be replaced, and in fact the deputies also agreed that it needed to be replaced. And that's what the proposal was, and that's what went out to consultation, for a proposal for a replacement fence for that section along inside the car park within that runs parallel with Davenport. Okay, so Councillor Davis.
I'll second the motion and reserve my right to speak.
Councillor Jones.
I'd like to say, Your Worship, that if the residents are confused, I'm not surprised, because I certainly am, because I was reading the officer's recommendation, and it constantly refers to Table 1, and Table 1 proposes that we might have fences on 3 sides of Hazelwood Park. So I'm not surprised that we've had people saying, don't like that very much, so I wouldn't be voting for the officer's recommendation. I'm somewhat baffled as to what this motion does, so I'm not sure I can support that either, but at least if I don't vote for either of them, nothing will get done. And what I would be happy with is let's replace what's there at the moment with this new plastic fencing, and I can live with that, and other than that, let's do nothing.
Councillor Pick.
A couple of questions, actually, if I could. Could someone explain what Councillor Jones just described, like replace the permapine with the fence and do nothing more? Is that the intent of the officer's recommendation?
No.
Can I have one of the administration answer it?
Yeah,
please.
Through Madam Mayor, if I can get Mr. Cant.
Sorry.
Apologies to those people listening.
Through the chair.
No, I'm going to stay in on it.
Because he wants a supplementary.
I don't have to with
he'll
her, do
lose
I?
a call.
Sorry. Through the chair, the proposal as written in the table was to only look at installing that section of fencing between the playground and the boom gate. All of the other sections that are listed in the table are for consultation only, and they are also listed in the CMP already, so there's nothing new in there that wasn't already in the adopted CMP. All this is doing is putting a time frame to undertake the consultation on those sections.
Thank you. Hopefully that helps Councillor Jones if we do get to the officer's recommendation, which would be my recommendation. The second question, if I may, which is not a follow-up question, but it is still relevant. Thank you. There was a question from one of the deputations around why are we using a fence this high when we could use a fence this high to achieve what we're trying to do in keeping vehicles off the reserve. Could I have an answer to that? Seemed a reasonable question.
Through the chair, the fencing that was proposed for that section was consistent with the fencing that's already in place around the playground. So the intent was that it would look like a seamless transition and not to introduce a new style of fencing in the location adjacent to that.
Thank you.
Councillor Henschke.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree with Councillor Jones. It is very confusing what we've got in the recommendation, as well as Councillor Davies' number 2 there, because I agree with Mr. Cant, what he just explained. Basically, effectively, what we have, the motion from Councillor Davey means we'll just be going ahead anyway with consultation and everything, because, as he said, the detailed risk assessment's been done, everything's been met, and then he'll progress. What we've got to do as councillors is set the strategy and policies. That's what we're here. We're not so interested in the nuts that are going to go into holding the fences together and stuff. So I go back to the conservation management plan, which the officer has followed, and the conservation management plan for Hazelwood Park does talk about fencing, and if that's not what the community want, we better change that tonight, or look towards changing that. Otherwise, both the officer's recommendation and this current motion will mean that the community will be facing, will have still a question mark, still uncertainty as to whether or not a fence will happen or not. And I think we just have to be quite upfront and say we are going to address the conservation management plan, and until such time as that's sorted out, and there's going to be never any fencing around Hazelwood Park except for the really critical bits around the playground. That would put them at ease, because otherwise they're going to be living across the road from this beautiful park for about, how many years? Wondering whether or not it's going to happen or not. And I think that's just too stressful. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
Still trying to clarify, but my understanding is that in the officer's recommendation, or Councillor Davies' recommendation, item C in table 1 will go ahead. Is that correct? All right. They're nodding at me, so I'm going to take that as a yes.
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, just for clarification. So just working through that, unless detailed risk assessment indicates a need, which it does, it will be subject to state heritage assessment as part of the development application, and we have undertaken community consultation.
Yes.
So the answer is yes.
For option C?
Yes.
And a follow-up question. So we are building C, then in relation to the other portions of the fences, both the officer's recommendation and Councillor Davies' motion is that further community consultation will be done on the other sections, and a risk assessment will be done, and then a report will come back to council with a recommendation regarding community consultation on all the other sections.
Through you, Madam Mayor, yes, that is correct.
Okay.
I don't think that there was ever any intent to go ahead with any further fences, except that the report was called for by Councillor Davey to find out what possible proposals could be made in the future. And that was never part of the consultation that went out to the community. The only thing that went out in the consultation, and I've got a document, a copy of it at home, said do you want this particular section of fence replaced? If so, do you
Yes or no?
approve of the
Okay.
style? That's where it's become confusing, I think.
Can I speak to the
Councillor
motion or can I wait?
Certainly can, yeah.
All right, I'm going to support the motion. So option C, like the portion C needs to be replaced. That permapine needs to be redone. The second question is about all the rest of it. And I understand why the residents are confused because the report is a report for us and the community consultation is a consultation for the community. But the question that the community answered, and 77% in favour of, was yes to replacement of portion C. So in my view, we should proceed with that, as intended, which is what the community is saying. Now, 44 responses, that's actually quite a bit. That's actually a really good response, because there's probably not 44, I'm not sure how many houses, but that's a pretty damn good majority of them. Yeah, there's one, that's right. So I think 44 is actually a very good response, and I certainly would say that it was indicative of anything further. Now, in relation to the other portions of the fence, that's the next step, and I believe that we should go out to community consultation on those points, and then they can have the same opportunity to say yes or no on those points. And so this is the officer's recommendation, and I believe Councillor Davies' motion do the same thing, in that C goes ahead, and then further consultation is gone and done on the rest of it. So I'm in favour of that, and I agree with that, and I'll vote for this motion.
Councillor Hughes.
I was just going to ask a question of staff. Is one of the reasons that we've had issues with the permapine being damaged because it is so low and people don't see it and hence they do hit it and damage it? Is that one of the reasons that we've had issues?
Dorothy Dixer.
Through your worship, we believe that is one of the causal factors. They've definitely been struck by vehicles in the past, so that would make sense.
Councillor Pick.
Oh. Could I propose an amendment? Please, could I propose a number 3? And you may need to help me with the words, but it needs to say, and perhaps not to clarify is not right, but that's what I want to do, to clarify, that section C will progress immediately. Proceed, thank you. That council proceeds will proceed immediately, and no other sections of fencing will progress without further consultation.
Can I also suggest that's actually made its number 2, because that's the direction that you're giving to the council, and then the third one is the additional, it makes more sense, then any additional fencing would be subject to all of those things that Councillor Davey has mentioned in. Excuse me, can you speak up and speak this way? Oh, sorry, I didn't have my microphone over, I'll repeat it. I'm just suggesting that perhaps we make that clause 2 a second clause rather than the third one, and then it follows more sequentially that any additional fencing would be subject to those 3 conditions.
Yes, that's
so. Does that
idea.
make sense?
Yeah.
If and I'd be happy if Councillor Davey would be is happy.
She won't be happy.
Do you want, so it's to be a formal amendment, so you're not accepting that as a...
No, she'll be happy. Sure. No. It's the same thing.
No, she won't. She doesn't want section C.
But that's what the motion does.
Well, you can
that's an
respond.
amendment. I'm not seeking variation, I'm seeking an amendment. I'll explain that.
It's an amendment. Okay, fine. That's okay.
Look, I may have this wrong, but I feel that Councillor Davies' intention in the alternative motion was to do things, is to actually not ever, as she's just said to me, progress with fencing onto section C. The fact is, though, the motion that she has raised here does progress section C. It ticks all the boxes required of the former number 2, and so that's what the motion does. We've got 2 arguments here as I see it. One is, do we or don't we progress now with section C? And the second is, what happens to the rest of the park? Now, what happens to the rest of the park seems pretty clear-cut and uncontroversial. We did ask for more information around what might happen, and we have got that. But we've also had the confirmation here in a number of fronts that nothing is going to happen with anything else apart from section C. And Councillor Davies, former number 2, does reinforce that. So that I feel is good, and the residents will be quite happy about that. Where the debate is whether we go with section C with what was proposed, what went out to consultation and what has come back, either positive in the people who responded or, to take the deputy's point, a large amount of residents not feeling the need to respond to that consultation. So it's really whether we proceed with section C with the fence that we've all got in front of us to replace the permapine. The other thing that doesn't seem to be controversial, and I'd certainly agree with that too, is that the permapine needs to be replaced, or it is at the end of the life. Perhaps not everyone wants to replace it, but it's at its end of its life. I do feel it does need some sort of protection around there, and I don't subscribe to the fact it absolutely ruins the park. I do understand where the neighbour across the road's coming from, but if you look at the photo on page 16, I think it's pretty inoffensive. It still actually provides quite a lot of through vision of the park, and it is consistent. The answer to my question as to why not a lower level one, I think that's compelling. It actually does go consistently with the fence already there around the playground, which again seems uncontroversial. Everyone's happy with that fence around that playground. So what this does is it does go contrary to Councillor Davies' original intention. I'm sure that's true. But what it does do is make the decision on section C to go ahead, bank the fact that nothing else is going to happen without more work and consultation, and makes it clear to residents, because I think that's fair. I think even the officer's recommendation was slightly vague in that, clear that we are going to progress with section C straight away based on the fact that we have had positive consultation. We obviously need state heritage approval. That's yet to be done, I think. Obviously that could stop it, but assuming that works, we will put section C in under that arrangement. I think that's what we should vote up. I would appreciate your support.
Right, I need a seconder for this. Councillor Lemon, you wishing to second it? Okay, do you wish to speak now? All right, thank you. No, you can't on an amendment, no. Councillor Turnbull, you're next.
Do we need to vote on the amendment? No.
I want to speak against the amendment. That's what I've had my...
No, you can't speak again.
Councillor Turnbull is next to speak.
You can't speak again.
But I had my...
There you are. You go.
Councillor Turnbull, you've got your microphone on. You are...
Yeah, I have. Yep, thank you. Just a quick question. Is there a timeline for section D, which is the bit from the boom gate down to the part of the park? It's not a very big bit, but it's got daggiest pine logs you've ever seen in your life. Pre-1991, so full of arsenic. They're falling to bits. People put their cars up, their bikes by them, and they die. Is there a timeline for this one, replacing that? And if so, with what sort of fencing? Would it be the same as for section C?
See, I didn't listen to a word you said. You know that, don't you? Not a word.
I know, boring.
No, Councillor Turnbull, that can't be included in any decision tonight because that was never part of the consultation.
Okay, right.
The consultation only went as far as the boom gate. Am I correct, Mr. Cant?
Through your worship, what I can say is it's covered within Table 1, Councillor Turnbull.
Okay, thank you.
And years 23-24, 23-24, and it goes into the description there. Bollards are recommended to be considered when the permapine fencing here is due to be replaced.
Yeah. So that's the next stage in the next budget.
Thank you. May I just
Decision
speak
of
to
the next council too.
Now, the cost of the proposed fencing is $40,000. I did ask the question, and bollards would be around about the same price. The fencing has been bought. We went to tender. The tender was accepted, and it's ready to install. The cost was $40,000. Even so, if we just did the supply bit, it would be $20,000 plus the cost of bollards. So what a waste! We can't afford to waste $40,000 or even $20,000. And also, there'd be reputational damage against the City of Burnside for pulling out of a contract. So I suggest we go with the amendment from Councillor Piggott and go ahead with it immediately. I'll be voting for that. Thank you.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. Just a question, if I can. Noting that I'm presuming the current permapine fencing will be removed in section C, will it be removed around the existing fence that goes around the playground, Wombat Waterhole? Because there's permapine fencing in the ground beforehand. That has been removed? Sorry, I'm just looking at the photographs. So you've already removed it.
That's my understanding. I think that's old photographs. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak on the amendment? Right, then...
Can't I speak on the amendment?
No. Now, Councillor Piggott.
I don't understand, sorry. Can someone tell me why I can't speak to the amendment?
Through Madam Mayor, if I can just refer that to Karishma.
Through the Mayor, it's because Councillor Davey has spoken to the motion.
When you moved it, Councillor Davis.
Right, I will go back to Councillor Piggott. Doesn't wish to say anything further? Sorry, he doesn't get a chance, that's right, so an amendment. Okay, so I will put the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands. Those against? The amendment is carried and now that becomes the motion. And there are still a few people who haven't spoken yet if they wish to speak. Councillor Hughes.
I'll speak very briefly. I think there's a lot of there's a lot that's gone into this, and I think the previous fencing was replaced, and I think part of the confusion and the reason why this perhaps appears that there hasn't been consultation was because it was actually included in that previous consultation that went out to the community saying we're going to do this section and then we will do the next section, and perhaps that wasn't clear initially, and hence this additional consultation was undertaken. The staff went and did that, so they had purchased the equipment or the gear to replace the fence, but then did actually go out and seek that feedback. And, you know, I guess from my point of view, one of the difficult and confusing things with Hazelwood Park is there are a lot of things that are in that conservation management plan that I think perhaps are not the general view of the community. So I think one of the real challenges for our staff is we've got this plan which is in place, which includes a number of additional paths, a number of additional things. And I think, you know, perhaps before we go out and do all this consultation on all these different sections of fences, maybe we should just go back and say, let's do a rejig of this plan, because I think there's a lot of people who may have had input at that, and we had the same issue with the car park. We've got something in the plan, and then when we go to get to that point, actually we consult on that, and the results come back that people are, their actual responses are inconsistent with the management plan, which creates a real difficulty, because as an elected body, we want to have these high-level strategies in place that as a body we don't need to go and consult on every little bit and bob that comes up, because we have a strategy in place around how we're going to manage these assets. So I think it's a real challenge for the staff to be able to manage some of these complex issues where we have things in a plan that are perhaps not the vision that the community sees. So I know we're running out of time as an elected body to move things, but I think perhaps that could be something that's looked at. I'm happy to move with the proposal that Councillor Piggott has put around replacing Section C. We have gone out and consulted the community. As I mentioned rather sniggeringly to Councillor Davis, 44 people responded, and actually I think that was more than we had that responded on the Dulwich Community Centre. So I think, you know, in the scheme of things, we had a resident who claims that's not a great response. Actually, you know, it's actually pretty good for what we've asked. In terms of saying 13% of people that lived in that area only responded and supported this, out of the people that responded, my understanding from speaking with staff around this is actually pretty consistent with the local residents that replied, and also then the total number of people, I think it was 77. So it's reasonably consistent in terms of those residents that did reply that live in the adjacent area compared to the broader community. So I'm happy to support Councillor Piggott's amended motion.
Councillor Henske, you have a question?
Yes, Madam Mayor, a question. Is a review of this plan possible?
Not in this term. It would be something that would be subject to the next council. Sorry, it would be something that would be subject to the next council. It can't be done in this term. We've got one council meeting left. So I think it was a very good suggestion from Councillor Hughes, and I'm sure that the CEO will take that on board for future reference.
Can we have a variation in here just to add that number 2 that
Not
it's
at this point in
subject
time.
to that?
No, can't be included at this point. So, Councillor Davey, you have a question?
I do. I'm still not clear, so I'd like clarification as to why part 2 does not progress installation of any additional fencing, does not negate, which was the intent of my motion, the table in any of the suggestions in table 1, because that's not mentioned in my motion. So that was negating all of what was in the previous 2, was a totally different, was a replacement which did not mention table 1.
Yes, certainly. So, through Madam Mayor, just walking through that one. So the first part says, do not progress unless, and then it says, a detailed risk assessment indicates a need. In the table, we have conducted a detailed risk assessment that indicated a need. Subject to the State Heritage Assessment? Yes, it will be subject to a State Heritage Assessment, and it has already undertaken a community consultation process for item C. So the wording of your motion supports the implementation of section C.
I'm going to put the motion. Those in favour? Sorry. Councillor Davies.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. As we've heard tonight, there is a lot of concern by those who are most affected by, who actually live on Hazelwood Park, and who will be most affected by installation of an intrusive fence, which many people think that is. Totally unnecessary fence. When the fencing was put around the children's playground, it was put there, developed and consulted on, and State Heritage was involved for that site, which was to make the playground safe and to ensure that children were protected there. It was never intended that that would be moved anywhere else in Hazelwood Park. I'm sorry I've stuffed up the motion tonight, because this is not the intent of my motion and what I was hoping to move. I do not think we should install this fence. There is no need at all for any additional fencing at this stage in Hazelwood Park. As the staff have advised, there have been no incidents with children being hit by cars. There have been no injuries. I was advised by this in an email 3 weeks ago. So there is absolutely no reason for us to install a fence of this height and extent and design in this part of Hazelwood Park. It's intrusive, it's not reasonable, and it's not necessary. I think staff are very zealous in their wanting to put it up, but I don't think the risk assessment supports that, and I hope you will vote this down. I certainly won't be supporting it.
All those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? Division's been called. Please stand, those who have voted in support. I'll call out the names. Councillor Cornish, Hughes, Piggott, Davis, Lemon, Turnbull, Dawes and Hubel. Those against? Councillor Henschke, Davey and Jones. And the motion was carried. Now we move to the second one of the night, and that is Councillor Dawes, portions of McKenna Street, item 11.2.
I just want to check, Mayor, it's 8:40. Do we want to have a 10-minute break now? Because I can just sense this won't take 20 minutes. That's all.
Oh, I was actually thinking we would do this and then we'd have a break. Please.
Okay, I'll go ahead.
We've got too much on. We need to get this one done.
Okay, no, just putting the 10 minutes early, that's all. Okay, I'm just a couple of changes. If Helen can just, only a couple of minor changes. To the officer's recommendation, 1.1, a total term of up to 3 years. I'll come back to explain why I'm saying that. And then we remove 1.4 completely. And I'll explain that. I just wanted to just take you through this. The first thing I will say to you is this comes about because of a motion that we passed in May, where I think Councillor Pickett was trying to find some sort of way forward. And he asked for a report on what else we can do with this land. And the administration has come back and talked about leasing. Why I have been looking at this particular area, I keep coming back that we did have 59% of residents in support of returning this to community land. That's always been in the back of my mind. I also want to say that 55 Yeronga is not involved anymore. I didn't realise that. It was mentioned in one of our earlier resolutions, but 55 Yeronga does not encroach. So now we're talking about 3 different residences: 2 Spencer, 4 Spencer and 57 Yeronga. Now the reason why I said 3 years is that I really wanted the new council to have a look at this again in 3 years' time. And that was the reason I'm suggesting 3 rather than 5. And the reason why I want to leave that 1.4, because I think it should be a very simple lease. I don't think we need to do anything more in regard to the lease. The only thing I would say is that I'd like to take a photo currently of that particular reserve and see in what state it is, and in 3 years' time that particular photo be taken again, and then the new council can say whether those residents have kept it to an appropriate standard. I did ask the Director of Corporate that for the 639 square metres, if we had an empty block in Kensington Park, what will be the rates this coming year for that block? And the answer was 3,728. So what I'm hoping will happen is that if we do lease this, and this is what this motion is talking about, we don't get it all back, but we do ask the residents involved, the 3 of them, to provide at least $1,000 each if they're going to lease it each year. But I won't say any more at this stage, except to say that I believe that 5 years is too long, and because the amount of resident support that we had before, we should look at it again in 3 years' time. Thank you.
Councillor Davey, are you seconding?
Yes, thank you.
Right. You wish to speak now?
Yes, I will, thank you. I thank Councillor Dawes for his very sensible recommendation. I agree that 3 years is a reasonable time frame for a lease, and that this issue does need to be reviewed and kept an eye on. It's a very unique set of circumstances, and I think a 3-year time frame for a lease is entirely reasonable. I also think that the amount of rentals suggested is reasonable. I think we should be recouping costs, and why should people, these people have encroached for years and they've got the benefit of community land. So I think now that we're formalising and regularising the situation, they should contribute accordingly. I'd also like to see close scrutiny of the management of the sites by staff and administration, so that they are actually looking after them. And the one question I do have is, does this prevent any utilisation of the land for development? I'd just like to verify that, I think it's 2 Spencer Street, will not then be able to develop the land if it is partially leased, that won't allow the ratio to click over so that development of his land could take place. Otherwise, I ask that you support this motion.
Through Madam Mayor, just to clarify that question of Councillor Davey, from refer that to Mr. Cant.
Through your worship, correct. It's our land. It would remain our land, so it doesn't give them any further opportunity than they currently have with respect to subdivision opportunities.
Councillor Court.
Thank you, Worship. Question initially to the administration. Given that across the road, number either 58 or 62, Yeronga is in a similar boat where it's got some land. In 3 years' time, is that something that we might be able to approach them to organise a lease over that land, since they're encroaching on our land right now and have got it for nothing?
I think I know the answer, but I'll get Mr. Cant's thoughts.
Through your worship, yes, we would have to do a detailed survey over that land and have those discussions, but absolutely in 3 years' time, if the situation is exactly the same, we can have those discussions at that point.
Great, thank you. I'll speak if I can. I get the sentiment, Councillor Dawes, but I am going to speak against this motion, and primarily for the removal of 1.4. A lot of conversation was had by Councillor Davey about wanting access, wanting to make sure things are kept up to date, and being able to have a CEO to actually put conditions on a lease that we can actually go in there and have a look, that we can make sure that it's maintained at a certain area, that we can access our pipes and stuff. I think it's quite important that we actually retain that 1.4, that the CEO can actually put any conditions required to access our infrastructure, or any other potential issues of vegetation on the land that might need to be looked after or well maintained. That's the only issue that I've got, is the removal of 1.4. Between 5 and 3 years, I don't really mind, but the 1.4 I think is a deal breaker for me, unfortunately.
Got a taste for it now.
Councillor Piggott.
Thank you, Mayor. Could I propose an amendment that restored 1.4, please?
Yes, you may.
Unless the mover would like to do it as a variation based on Councillor Cornish's compelling argument.
It resonated with many of us.
Can I just ask that a 1.2 covers 1.4 through illustration?
No, it doesn't. Because it's just standardised lease terms.
Through Madam Mayor, if I could just comment about 1.2, the key there is our standard terms and conditions. I do hold on to the commentary of Councillor Cornish that I think 2 of the comments this evening probably will require different wording than our standard wording. If I may comment, Councillor Dawes, my intention will be to make the lease as unencumbered as possible and still comply with council's requirements, even with that 1.4 in there, should you choose to put it back in.
Councillor, you're going to stay as it is? Okay.
All right,
so you're moving the amendment?
I'm speaking for the amendment.
Yes.
Yes, please. Actually, the reason I originally pressed the button was to ask the question of whether 1.4, the removal of 1.4 made a difference, and then Councillor Cornish explained that it probably did. I don't see the downside, actually, in leaving it in. All we're allowing is anything that the CEO considers appropriate in the interests of council, and I don't see any, I can't see any issues with that. I can't see anything that's going to go against us. It's got to be in the interest of council. It's a decision of the CEO. So I think it's a sensible amendment to go back to the original recommendation. I think Councillor Dawes' change of 5 to 3 is sound. Certainly support everything else, but it does need 1.4, I feel.
I seek
support. Sorry, yeah.
I seek a seconder for the amendment. Councillor Lemon, do you wish? You have to speak now or not? Okay. Yes. Okay, thank you. Then now Councillor Davey, are you speaking on the amendment?
I have a question. Councillor Cornish mentioned a property nearby that has encroachments. Are we currently undertaking a survey of properties which encroach on council? I seem to remember we moved a motion and had a whole lot of discussion about doing some sort of an assessment of these type of properties. Is that underway?
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I can fill that to Mr. Cant.
Through your worships, yes, of those that we are aware of. So the one that Councillor Cornish referred to, we're actually waiting to see the outcome of this matter, because obviously that will indicate how we approach that matter if it's a similar outcome. So once this matter is resolved, we'll then proceed with the surveys and we'll do that accordingly. And if there's an issue, we'll place that in front of the next council.
Councillor Dawes, you have a question?
Oh, no, I didn't, sorry.
Now it's Councillor Henschke.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. A question for the administration, please. On page 42, item 34, it says that the number 4 Spencer Street had concerns about accessing, sorry, I can't see without my reading glasses I left at home, about the safe use of the swimming pool and tennis court should fences be constructed along the boundaries of the reserves. I'm just not, I'm a bit not clear about this statement. I mean, if you've got a pool in a block of land, you would always have to be supervising children anyway in the block of land next to the pool. So I can't see why access across a reserve would stop them being in the block looking at the swimming pool with children in it.
Through you, Mayor, my understanding of that comment was it was trying to imply that if there was a fence 1.8 metres high that may impede vision from the property with the house on it to see a line of sight to the pool. But in the situation that we're considering this evening, we're actually not talking about fencing it. So that comment becomes irrelevant.
Yeah, right. So that's irrelevant. So my question then is, why do we have to bother about leasing anyway and just retain the reserve as per item 14 that Council agreed last meeting, that we maintain community land classification, tidy it up, we maintain it, get on with it, and people can walk across it to get to the pool. I just don't, can you clarify my
Through you, Madam Mayor, with regard to the previous resolution of Council, it was determined that we would look at the leasing option rather than taking back ownership and fencing that and excluding the owners from that parcel. So what's before you this evening is the option that Council can put a lease over that property and effectively charge the residents for the right to use that land, generate some revenue, and effectively gain the same outcome, but with much less pain.
Excuse me, just to clarify, that resolution, the question is that does not mention leasing at all in it. The resolution in May, 24th of May, it just talks about retaining community land classification, advising the owners, discuss with them, look at future options with them, contacts them. So I'm just not sure why we have gone down, I mean, we're recommending leasing, but that's not in the motion of the 24th of May.
So, if I may, Madam Mayor, focusing on point 4 there for a minute, it's about detailing future options. So I'm recommending to you this evening that the option I'm recommending you pursue is the leasing option.
Oh, okay, thank you for clarifying.
That's okay.
Really appreciate that, thank you.
Councillor Hugh.
I'll speak very briefly. I'm happy that with the amendment of bringing back in 1.4, I think it gives some flexibility, and I think the CEO understands the intent of where we've got to. still not sure whether I'm going to vote for you, Councillor Dawes, just based on the 3 to 5, just because I think this keep coming back to the table. We're going to keep getting questions like we've got tonight, and I don't really see the value in bringing it back next council term just because the next council needs to see it. I actually think the council after that could see it, and there would probably be no love lost, to be honest. So I appreciate the sentiment, but I'm not convinced that I'm going to vote for this. I was happy to support the officer's recommendation, but I'm happy to see the debate play out. See if you can get me over the line.
Councillor Davey?
I just had a question in terms of the problem property, the one with the tennis court and swimming pool over the other side. What if that was sold in the interim? What would happen if that status changed or any of the properties were sold? How would the lease be managed in respect to that?
Through Madam Mayor, I might just read that Mr. Cant. My initial thought is that it'll be a condition of the sale that a lease will be put in place, but I'll get Mr. Cant's advice.
Through your worship, yeah, that's correct. The lease will have a standard clause in it that talks about assignment of lease. So if they sell the property, then they would need to assign the lease to the new owner, and we'd have to be involved in those discussions.
Right, then I am going to put the amendment, and those in favour of the amendment. Those against the amendment. Right, then the amendment is carried and the amendment becomes the motion. And now I'm going to go back to Councillor Dawes to speak to that. You're speaking, summarising, please. If it's in your summary, yes.
I press mute. Just want to respond to Councillor Hughes' concern here. I have been one that when we have a fair proportion of resident responses, when we have a fair proportion, then I will support the residents. All right? Now, the only query is what is a fair. I think the only time that I didn't agree when we had a very small number about the toilet at the bottom of Brock Reserve. We had so few that responded to that. But we did have 59% in favour, and that's why I say, okay, we didn't listen that time. There was some emotion involved from the residents there. So Councillor Pickett, to his credit, came up with a let's see what else we can do and just soothe the waters a little bit. But I do believe that when we got 59%, we should give another opportunity to have another look at it, and it might be we do another consultation, and it may be that it'd be the opposite, and then I would leave it. But when it's 59%, I will say that I should support the residents on that. But I agree with what we're doing, because I think it would just take the heat out of the situation and see if they do look after that area over the next 3 years. Thank you.
Right, I put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Now I'm suggesting that we do have a 10-minute break at this point in time. Right, thank you, Councillor Dawes. Councillor Davis, seconded. I get an indication from the rest of you that you are in support of that, please. All right, thank you. I have enough hands. We're going to restart this meeting now, and I'm calling upon Councillor Piggott to talk about the City Master Plan.
The Chamber will be relieved to know, Madam Mayor, that I am not changing the officer's recommendation. Boo. I pulled this because of its significance, and because I think it's, and I might have said this before, it's where, and it's interesting, sorry, I'll come back to that. It's where councils need to operate in this sort of zone. Got other areas we need to operate, I know, sort of fences on general reserves and stuff, but this is a really heavy piece of work, and there's a lot of heavy work to come off the back of it. And it's important that future councils push that through and push that through progressively, like as in urgently. Do it in do it in the right time scale, but get on with it. It really has the potential for influencing what this city looks like in 20, 30, 40 years. And having done the work around what we'd like to see it look like, it's important that we do really make this a priority. And I think it has gone into the KPIs for the CEO in the next year. And it has the ability, if we are successful in it, to really make some hugely positive outcomes for people living in the city of Burnside, dealing with the pressures coming from outside that we will experience, like the need to accommodate more people going forward. Depends on how you look at it. The plan has winners and losers, but they're not all consistent. They're not all living in. Not all the losers are in the same place, and not all the winners are in the same place. But the key central plank to it is to protect certain suburbs and direct the growth population to other suburbs. And I hope my hope is that City of Burnside does this really well, in that I think both of those can be winners. If we can get it right in saving the suburbs that we are keen to maintain the block sizes, that's clear. And if we can do the really good planning and good development around the increased populations along main roads and activity centres, that too can be areas that's a positive place to live. So I think there's a really good piece of work. I'm really happy to put my name to the moving of the motion. I congratulate everyone involved, and I ask whatever councils are sitting around here in future councils that they progress it with urgency.
Thank you, Councillor Piggott. Councillor Lemon.
I'm very happy to second that. I am very happy to put my name to this piece of work too. This is a seminal work for this council, and I think it's one of the most significant pieces of work that I've seen come through. We have our strategic plan. We've always had a strategic plan for Burnside, but it's very high level and it's not really understandable. This one is. This actually people can pick up and they can see how it affects them. And I think that this is the beginnings of great things. It is, Councillor Piggott is right. This is the way that councils have to go in the future. You cannot do stuff in a piecemeal fashion. You need to look at the entire city, because when you fiddle around, and we're going to in a minute on Armand Avenue, it's going to have effects elsewhere. But if you've got a master plan, you can actually see where you're going to have effects. So what you do it once and you do it properly if you've got a master plan, and this master plan gives us that opportunity. And there's so much more that can be added to it and will be added to it in years to come. So congratulations to everyone to getting it to this point. And I actually also think that the sort of support we've had with our community consultation says it all. People are desperate for these sorts of long-term plans. We don't have them in government anymore these days. This is the beginning of something fantastic for Burnside, and I'm really pleased to be supporting it. Councillor Davis.
It is something that's been around for an incredibly long time in terms of which suburbs do we, and how do we treat them in terms of connecting them with other parts of the city. Rat running is of course a major issue that I think everyone has faced from time to time. And having a strategic overlay that then gives us an objective to work towards, gives us a framework. And actually, it's quite surprising because so many cities don't have these types of master plans. And that's something that City of Burnside Council, I believe, has done incredibly well. And this has been a long time coming. And the action items, if you actually have a look at, whilst you go through the overview of the plan may seem, it sets out objectives and our ideals, and then to actually implement those objectives and ideals comes through in the action plan over the next 20 years. So I'm incredibly glad to see this implemented, and I absolutely think this will assist future councils, and there's obviously more work to go through through the implementation, but this provides an excellent framework, and I believe that every council, and particularly Adelaide City Council, should also have similar plans like this to give residents certainty over a longer period of time rather than deciding on a per street basis or as things pop up. So very glad to see this come in this council.
Thank you. Councillor Davey.
Oh, sorry. I wish to move an amendment, please. And that is, I've sent it through to you, Karishma. Thank you. And it is, I endorse all that's already been said, but I endorse 1, the city master plan, 2, and that we progress consideration of the action plan at attachment B to an elected member workshop for consideration to include the integration of Ghana heritage, local heritage and building character, also disability access and inclusion, and possible social housing before finalisation for the consideration of new council members and through subsequent long-term financial plans, annual business plans and budgets. And 3, includes consideration of funding allocation of $40,000 for the open space layer in the second quarterly budget review for inclusion in the 2022-2023 budget. So the reason I've moved that is, notwithstanding the comments that have been made, which are fantastic.
Excuse me, Councillor Davey, I've just had recognition or an indication that that's not an amendment, it's an alternate motion.
Sorry?
It's not an amendment, it's an alternate motion.
You're not adopting it.
Hence I can't accept it.
So it's just changing the action plan.
I'm taking advice. This is not my decision.
Okay, I'll speak to it and I'll say.
The change is too major from the original motion.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'll speak to it and hope that people will listen to my concerns.
So, Davey, you can speak to the original motion. You can't speak to this one because it's not being accepted.
Okay, but I'll speak and say that this is what I would like to move if the original is lost. So that's how I will address this. If I can start my time from now. Thank you to all those who've worked on the master plan to this stage. As everyone has said, it has taken a long time. There's been a lot of work gone into it. It's been a very big effort, and it starts the process for us to strategically manage and control the type and extent of development, hopefully, and its effects across Burnside. We're already bearing significant negative impacts from the new planning and design code on both residential and business amenity. Urban consolidation means big challenges to our way of life and our local and wider environment, particularly with the loss of trees and shrubs in home gardens, the loss of street trees, and the increased urban heat bank effect as the ratio of green cover to grey cover is being lost with increased paving and grey cover and the huge roofs that are now being built. I believe the action plan at attachment B, which is great, it's a whole lot of work that's been done, but it needs further work because it has only just recently been finalised. We were only sent this 3 weeks ago. I actually missed it. I didn't see that it had been released. It wasn't brought to our attention for such a significant document. It was in the middle of the school holidays, and it was in the middle of the huge ructions we had when one of our colleagues resigned. I think it needs greater focus up front because it doesn't mention our Ghana heritage. It doesn't mention, we need to focus on heritage and character of buildings far more and have actions on that. There's no mention of the Disability Action and Inclusion Plan and how that will fit into this, the actions under this. There's a passing reference, but I think we need far more detailed mention of that if we're to genuinely address that issue. There's no mention of safety. I mean, we talk about pedestrian safety generally, that's great, but there's no mention for safety and access for the increasing numbers of wheelchair and gopher pedestrians and people walking with walking aids, and for the vision impaired. There's no mention of these, nor what contribution, if anything, can be considered to social housing. I mean, we've got pockets of Burnside where there's social housing. There's an increased need for this in our community. This isn't mentioned in our master plan, and I think it should be. With our concern for climate change, we must focus on environmental sustainability at the earliest possible stage of development and planning. Traffic management and parking growth are a real challenge to the residential amenity of many pockets in Burnside, and we've started to address this, particularly the Beulah Park, Eastwood, Dulwich and Rose Park areas. The state government has established, only last week I believe, a review panel to assess South Australia's planning legislation, and that isn't mentioned in this, and that will have an impact. So I believe we need to refer this for a workshop. We need to workshop this, and that should have been scheduled, I respectfully suggest, and I think the next council should have input into finalisation of the action plan. We'll have a new council in 3 months. So I ask you to vote down this motion, and I will move this as an alternative motion. Thank you.
Councillor Dawes?
Yes, I have a question for administration. If the second part, not the first part, I think everybody, I would say, supports the first one. The second part, if we don't finalise the action plan tonight, what effect does that have on the master plan process from the administration point of view? Could I just get a response to that?
Through the Mayor, I might get a comment from Mr. Cant.
Through you, Your Worship, it delays. We're not actually asking you to approve the action plan through the motion itself. It's just we're noting that we're progressing the implementation of the action plan. So if you endorse the city master plan as such, there's already actions or items that have already been approved through the existing annual business plan and budget for year one, which we will progress anyway because they're already approved through the budget process. So in short, we will proceed with the year one of the action plan as presented to you.
I'm sure I read that further years are subject to reviews by the new council anyway on an annual basis. Right. Anyone else wish to speak? Otherwise, I'll go back to Councillor Piggott. Oh, sorry, someone's just come in. Councillor Cornish.
Sorry. Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much. Amazing piece of work. I completely concur with everyone. It is absolutely a key document for this city. And it's taken many years and many hours of heartache for a lot of staff. And I thank you for that. I think it's going to be a great roadmap for the city going forward, and to bring the residents along with us. So I do want to see it promoted far and wide if we can. Thank you.
Councillor Dawes?
Yes, I'm going to do a Councillor Piggott and put forward a possible amendment which he may support and his seconder may support, not sure. But it was actually in the third part of Councillor Davies' motion, because the key part of this particular master plan from the development side is the increased developments along arterial roads. And there is a map that we've seen many times, and I'm still not quite sure if the residents understand that. But what must go with that is an open space plan and open space layer. Now, we couldn't include it in the 22-23 budget in June, but I picked up what Councillor Davies said, which is could we include consideration of funding allocation of $40,000 for the open space layer in the second quarterly budget review, which comes out early 2023, for inclusion in the 2022-23 budget? And I keep hearing Councillor Cornish say to me many times, we never ever have the same budget. We always have a final result that's better than budget. So I'm not saying that we should, but in Q2, if we have the funds, I would like to start that open space layer matter earlier than 23-24. And if we can start it, say, in, let's say, April 2023, I think that would be a positive. So would, Councillor, we can't add that?
I'm just getting it checked, but I suspect it's actually a change.
Oh, okay.
It is being currently checked.
Thank you.
I think the other thing you have to consider is that the new council will be making those kinds of decisions about budgetary, supporting budgetary decisions.
Okay.
But I am seeking advice on this.
Thank you. What?
No, I won't.
So yeah, I knew that both had to agree.
I just need to get government's perspective on it.
Remember, I'm not saying definite, I'm saying includes consideration. It's not a definite decision for the new council. They have to make up their mind at that time. Okay.
If you wish to include that, Councillor Dawes, it would be deemed as an alternate motion, not an amendment. It isn't, because it's a material change. Okay. All right. Councillor Henschke, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Great things like the citywide cycling map and action plan and pedestrian crossings on arterial roads, and it goes on and on and on and on. All little fine print, lots of fine print, lots of actions, lovely, great to have a plan, year after year after year after year, great stuff. I heard tonight our residents at Hazelwood Park, you know, busy people, and they didn't, you know, engage in the conservation management plan for the reserve. Didn't realise that in there it did talk about fencing all the way around, maybe. So I think, yes, it's going to be, we're going to have to spend time continuing to engage with residents on this. The consultation we've done so far is one pass, but we've got to keep engaging. The more we engage, the better we perform. So there are no surprises. But there was a surprise the other week, and our dear Councillor Dawes is our elected member on the assessment panel. I don't like calling it the council assessment panel because it's actually an assessment panel with less council members on it. But thank you. The thing is, our master plan says if you're on the north of an arterial road, look, we can go to 4 stories because the overshadowing's not going to be great because it's going to overshadow on a road, and so you won't have shadow on your house. If you're on the southern side of the road, you'll have your 3 stories, you know, a little bit of overshadowing on those back lanes, those houses. Right, okay, we get that. But the other week we had 4 stories in the middle of a suburb, completely out of our control. And this master plan has no legal power. It all resides with the policies, the state, in the planning design code. I am hopeful that the implementation review will review all of this. I'm hopeful that the recommendations of the parliamentary inquiry that's just been published this week will be implemented. And yes, this master plan will have iterations and details and so forth. I just wanted to say we're in a new world, new government, and outcomes from a parliamentary inquiry could change the landscape a bit. So I do hope that the vision for Burnside is not going to be multi-storey everywhere and giving lots of people surprises. That's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Right, is there anyone else? I don't have anyone on the screen. No, Councillor Day.
Thank you. I have a question. Just following on from what Councillor Henschke has said, can I just have clarification, and I might have missed it in the report, how will actions in the plan be translated to and picked up by our planning people?
Through Madam Mayor, probably the key way that will occur is through a couple of code amendments that will be put into the state. One in particular, you'll recall, was around seeking to, for example, increase minimum lot sizes across certain parts of Burnside. That will require code amendments. So that's how we get the legal frameworks to support what we're trying to achieve with this master plan.
Councillor Piggott, would you like to sum up?
I've got another question.
Councillor Davey?
How, with the items that I mentioned, which I believe are omitted from the action plan, how do we include issues like recognition of our Ghana responsibilities and how that impacts on a lot of this work, and the disability action plan for starters? How do we get those incorporated in the action plan?
Certainly. Through me, the first comment I would make is that every plan doesn't have to regurgitate other commitments that we've made across council. So, for example, we have a reconciliation action plan that is about to come into play. That will provide an overarching framework that will encompass all of council's operations. Likewise, our DDA approach, we have an overarching document that makes commitments about how council would approach its requirements in that space. Having said that, when we start to look at the action plans and actually implementing the actions, that is when you'll start to see those components occur. You know, we will be consulting with our access and inclusion community group. So I don't see it needing to have particular mentions as you were seeking this evening, because the council has already made those commitments in overarching statements. As an administration, we have them as a lens when we do all our projects. I don't need it to be re-said in every single document that comes before us. Thank you.
I think it's a little like, to Councillor Davey, you're aware of the public health plan, and the public health plan covers everything that we do in terms of state and through the Eastern Health Authority regional plan. So that is actually an overwhelming document that actually does control or direct us in many, many different ways. Thank you all. I shall go now to Councillor Piggott.
Thank you. Before I sum up, I'd just like to just reinforce, there was a comment in the report from the Urban Development Institute of Australia that talked about the protection and growth code amendments being run concurrently to ensure that they are delivered concurrently, which struck me as actually a pretty sensible principle. It would be a shame to see the agreement to higher levels perhaps without getting the agreement to maintaining lot sizes further south. So I felt that was right. Look, I think it is a good piece of work. It may not have everything covered off down to that level, but what it does do is hit planning and transport very strongly at a very high level. And Councillor Henschke, I agree with Councillor Henschke in that we shouldn't believe that, you know, this is everybody out there knows exactly what's in it, and we've had consultation that reflects people's understanding of it, or even their knowledge that it exists. That is still yet to come, and there's no question that people don't look at these things until they really are impacted by them. At the moment, we're very early on. So what needs to happen down the track is that needs to be done quite convincingly. Multi-storey everywhere, a couple of things there. This is precisely why we're doing it, I think, so that we have control of what is multi-storey and where it does go. I think council, though, needs to, you know, we do represent people who actually quite like living in multi-storey. it's not a one-size-fits-all. We can't judge everybody by the way we prefer to live and perhaps the way our neighbours prefer to live. There is a requirement, and there'll be more so going forward, I think, for different types of housing in Burnside. And that's what this does as well. So I think, yeah, look, it's a great piece of work. It's only the start. The tough bit's yet to come. But, you know, if anyone can achieve it, I think it's the City of Burnside. So I appreciate your support.
All those in favour? Against? Carried. I'm not allowed to say unanimously, but it was unanimous, and it can't be... Oh, apologies, it was not. No, I'm sorry, it was not. I'm not allowed to say it, because I can't say it. Councillor Lemon, let's move on.
Thank you. So we are now at item 11.4, and administration should have the variation I've got, which I have with their full compliments. In fact, it's their variation rather than my, well, it was my variation, but they told me what to say. So I'll just explain, so I'll just go through this. We had an excellent deputy tonight, and I'm not going to go through the reasons we've got that, because I think you got all that from that deputation, the reason we're having this traffic management. But what I wanted to make sure about, I'll talk to point 8. I think the staff have had too much red cordial tonight. In any case, I'm just going to talk to my variation because I think we've heard enough about this and we understand what it does. And my variation is specifically because there was no sunset clause in it. So we're going to, in fact, make this a one-way street and do a variety of other things, and we were going to do it to the end of time without review. And I don't think that's the right thing to do for this particular street in that particular area. So I've asked for a review of these localised traffic conditions during the development of the traffic management plan for Glenside. And the reason for that is Armand Avenue fronts, sort of got Kyle Street on one side and Sydney Street on the other, and as it's going to become a one-way street, it's going to go west to east. So you've got people coming in from Kyle that will actually be moving into Sydney. Now, we know that there's a set of lights at the end of Sydney Street, which is the moved pedestrian crossing, but there isn't one at Kyle. And most of you don't know this, but I'm actually, one of my core competencies is being a really good rat runner. And one of the things I'm really worried about in terms of this is that people are going to go down Kyle, nip up the one-way street, and then nip up Cator and do a right turn onto Portrush Road, having missed 2 sets of lights on Greenhill Road. And I think that this is why I want this reviewed. I want it looked at before the redevelopment of Burnside, after the redevelopment of Burnside, because it may well be that we need to change that one-way street to run east to west to prevent that. Or it may well be that we need to change it to left turn only and have no right turns at that street. I don't know what the consequences of this are likely to be, but the reason for this is there will be consequences. We don't know what they are now, but they'll be in the neighbouring streets, potentially. They might even be on Sydney Street, because that is a street that takes a lot of traffic. So I've added this bit, and I hope you support it, and I'll ask me questions if you like.
Councillor Dawes, you're seconding?
Yeah, I'll second this motion. Look, I think it's the first time since I've been on council that someone's come into this council as a deputy and said, I support what has been put forward and I love what you're doing. So, you know, nothing more than that. I support number 8 now, that I think that's part of the City Master Plan, so I thank Councillor Lemon for that. But yeah, this is a no-brainer for me, a no-brainer.
Councillor Piggott.
Yeah, just coming off the back of Councillor Dawes, the other thing that the deputation did, I felt, was an example of someone who's actually been trying to do something for himself as well and not just throwing it back to the council for a solution. So I too support this motion, and the review that Councillor Lemon has introduced makes a lot of sense.
Councillor Henschke?
I question, Madam Mayor. I understood that some residents on another street in Rose Park were not happy about having flashing lights. So are these residents happy about flashing lights? Have we checked with them?
Through your worship, so I just had to confirm there. Yeah, it was based on the petition that was received by the residents at the time, and we have been in consultation with the residents on the street. Having said that, we'll also do notification prior to the lights going in.
Yep.
That would usually flush out any other concerns that any residents have, and we'll deal with them accordingly.
Thank you.
Councillor Courtney?
Thank you. Following on from that, sorry, but the flashing lights, that will be an issue, and it'll be a lot further, like down Sydney Street. I could imagine like hundreds of metres, you know, late at night, light pollution and stuff. So I'm just wondering, how far are you planning on discussing that, or are they dimmable at night time? Are they only working throughout, you know, the peak periods when people are actually crossing the road? You know, when the actual centre's open till 9 p.m. You know, those sort of questions, I suppose.
Through your worship, they are operating 24 hours a day. So taking on board some of the suggestions, we'll actually increase the notification catchment area a little bit on this one, just to ensure that we cover everywhere, that we'll have a sight vision, especially at night.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Davey? Thank you.
I have a question about the redevelopment of the Burnside. Of the Burnside village redevelopment will have a significant impact on this area of Burnside. I know because I have a friend who lives nearby, and the whole dynamic of the area is changed by construction work with all the tradies, the huge vehicles, etc. How will that impact on this proposal, please?
Through Madam Mayor, if you're talking during the construction period, is that specifically what we allude to? I actually think the impots that's going to be had on this precinct during construction, and I've been advised that they're looking to house upwards of 400 tradies at any one time during the peak periods. I don't see this action having a positive or negative impact on the activity that's going to occur. I think it'll be a moot point. I don't see it being a negative.
And a follow-up question, if I may. And the whole parking situation will change, that whole dynamic will change, and all the traffic flows, because, I mean, I believe there's huge excavations to take place on the village site. There'll be staff parking issues and all of that. So will that affect this proposal?
Yeah, so through Madam Mayor, I do feel that there probably are two separate issues. I think this is a very good solution for the issue we're trying to solve here. Just reflecting for a minute on the Burnside Village Works, we are going to be working with the owners to look at what we can do to assist the parking issues that will undoubtedly arise during construction. But this particular issue we're talking about this evening, I don't think will have any impact on that.
Councillor Lemon, I'm going back to you.
Thank you. I'll address the flashing lights issue in the first instance. I understand that there's a spillover, but if you actually had a look at the site, you'll see that there's probably only 2 or 3 houses that may well be affected from that, because it's this raised pedestrian crossing is in front of Coles, back entrance on Sydney Street. And on one side of the road, you've got all of Coles and it's a blank wall. And on the other side of the road, you've got this particular street that we're talking about, Almond Avenue, and then maybe a couple of houses, but they're indented back from this. So I don't know that this is, I mean, I appreciate that there's going to be some community engagement in terms of what's going on, but I actually don't think the flashing lights are going to do that much in terms of distressing any neighbours, because I don't know that they're really that close to any neighbours. But the other thing is, I've used Sydney Street because I actually park on Sydney Street if I've got to nip into Burnside Village rather than go underneath, because it's just too awkward to get out again. And I have to say, that pedestrian crossing is dangerous for pedestrians. You really, because of the parked cars on the side of the road, the flashing lights are likely to save people's lives, I think, because I think it's pure luck that somebody with a walking frame or a gopher hasn't been hit with a car. And that street, Sydney Street, since it's had its sets of lights put at the end on Green Hill Road, takes a lot more traffic than it used to, because people come down Sydney Street, up Cator and do a right turn on Port Rush, and thereby they miss the lights here on Green Hill Road, and they probably, even doing 40 kilometres an hour, they probably save themselves 5 minutes by doing that. So I actually think it's essential that we put flashing lights on that pedestrian crossing. I think it would be quite wrong of us not to do so, to keep pedestrians safe. So I hope you support this. And we will be reviewing it in the fullness of time.
All those in favour? Those against? Councillor Davey, you didn't vote that time. No, you told me off for not noticing last time, so I made sure I noticed. So are you voting in favour or against? Yes, in favour. Okay, thank you. The motion was carried. Now, the next one is Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I have an
11.5.
alternative motion. Would you happy that I read it, Your Worship?
I think it's needed to, for the sake of people at home, if they're watching, because they can't see it very well.
Yeah. And for members as well. So, number one, the Council receives in notes report number 195-22. And second, requests that former Councillor Carbone repay a portion of the legal spend, being $7,303, which relates to his Code of Conduct investigation and is based on the cost of the forensic IT investigations, $3,903, and the excessive cost incurred as identified by Mel Olsen of $3,400. Happy for me to speak to it?
Sorry, you're going to speak to it?
Yeah. Councillors, I would like you to cast your minds back to 1 month ago when this council was embroiled in a scandal that received international attention. The Advertiser covered this Code of Conduct like none other before it. The community's engagement in this Code of Conduct was unprecedented. That is the starting point for this motion, and it comes from the request of many residents and ratepayers for Councillor Carbone to repay legal fees. Firstly, I note that we cannot require Councillor Carbone to pay anything. There is no power to recoup the fees expended on this matter. Rather, this is an invitation to heal as far as that may be possible. Councillor Carbone had every right to defend his position and to put his case. And in my view, the cost of a reasonable inquiry and a reasonable defence should sit with the party who incurred them. The report found that Councillor Carbone did breach our Code of Conduct. It is my view that Councillor Carbone went far beyond what would be considered reasonable, though. I consider his response to be obstructive and an attempt to draw the matter out, which necessarily incurred legal fees far beyond what would normally be incurred through a normal Code of Conduct. Ratepayers were unsurprisingly outraged at the cost of the Code of Conduct and the fact that they ultimately had to pay it. This outrage was very much made clear through comments, emails, and calls to the City of Burnside's front desk and to each of us individually. The actions that increased costs included his demands for the contact details of the girl who made the complaint so that he could meet with her, the various excuses regarding being hacked or other IT issues, and further his false explanations of how Instagram works, which unnecessarily required us to engage an IT expert, and his challenges as to the assessing officer's ability to hear the matter due to their conflict of interest. Each of these actions necessarily raised the cost of the Code of Conduct. The report before us states that as a result of these unnecessary actions, our ratepayers have incurred an additional $7,303. And I do understand this council is desirous of putting this event in our past. However, I draw your attention to the response from our community surrounding this circumstance, and many of our community were angered that they now had to pay for the cost of the Code of Conduct. I hope our community understands that we have no ability to force Councillor Carbone to repay any fees. The most we can do is request a reimbursement. Many of us here stand for transparency and also for accountability, and it is incumbent upon us to hold our peers accountable for their actions. This motion does that, and I seek your support.
Seek a seconder. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I'm happy to second this motion. I think this is an entirely reasonable request. Councillor Davis has very comprehensively outlined the rationale for this, and I think it's entirely reasonable. And hopefully Councillor Carbone will come good and honour and redeem himself in this way. I think this is an opportunity to do that. So hopefully you'll support it.
Councillor Turnbull.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll speak against the motion. I think this report is a waste of Burnside Council staff time and money in its formulation. I've received no emails from anyone, but why do I think it's such a waste of time? Because there's no precedent in this council for repayment of money for codes of conduct. Number two, the legal action was commenced by the council to investigate the complaint, including the IT forensic investigation. Each of the four options on page 107, 1, 2, 3 and 4, all use the word request for repayment of some or all of the monies, no request for reimbursement, that word request. On page 108, conclusion number 30, it says, the council under the current Code of Conduct can request the repayment of monies. However, it's not possible to enforce this request currently unless raising a Code of Conduct under Part 3 of the Code. Not another Code of Conduct, not more legal fees. Please no, vote against it, please. Thank you.
Councillor Hughes.
I will also be voting against the motion for a number of reasons. We've had a number of Code of Conducts in this chamber over the last 4 years, and I don't actually believe that Councillor Carbone is the only person who has perhaps not acted in their own best interests and perhaps caused us to be in a position where things have cost more. And I think that's been across the board, and I think at the end of the day, it is disappointing, the whole situation that we were in, but I think to set a precedent to request this one individual when there have been other people throughout this term and we haven't requested any of those people repay council funds for investigations is, I believe, is unfair. So I won't be supporting it. I think Councillor Carbone has resigned. Essentially we'll be saving his salary for the next 3 months, and that will contribute to some of these costs, I think, that we've incurred. So there will be that saving. I think to pick this Code of Conduct out against my memory of some of the other ones that we've seen in this term, I think it was disappointing. It was obviously did cause a controversy, and I'm not obviously approving of the position that we were in, but I think what's done is done, and we just need to move on as an elected body. I think there's no ability for us to guarantee that we'll get that money back, and I suspect we will waste more than $3,000 to $7,000 in staff time preparing legal letters, chasing for the money anyway. So I will not be supporting the motion as presented.
Councillor Dawes.
Yes, I have a question for administration. I know the answer, but I did ask the Director of Corporate for this, answer. With the forensic IT investigations, was that something that the investigating lawyer sought permission to spend to enable him to finalise his investigations?
Through Madam Mayor, yes, permission was sought before that was undertaken, but that was required to determine the veracity of certain claims made by ex-councillor Carbone.
Councillor Davis, you have a question?
Yes. How much would it cost to write Councillor Carbone a letter asking for him to repay $7,303?
Through Madam Mayor, essentially the cost is zero because I'll just do it as part of my normal business.
Councillor Cornick?
Thank you, Worship. I've got to say I'm a little torn with this one. I completely agree with the additional costs with this, and yes, if Councillor Carbone managed his side of the investigation or made better decisions, these costs might not have occurred. Absolutely, or additional costs over and above a normal code of conduct that we've seen. It is a request only though, so I'm not sort of flipping. You know, we've made other requests with codes of conduct. Some of them have happened and some of them haven't happened. So, you know, it's only a request. You don't actually have to follow through with them. You know, so I'm kind of like, I'm torn, but then Councillor Hughes definitely sort of said something as well that sort of takes me back the other side, the fact that we haven't, you know, been consistent with asking for repayment across the board. You know, there can't be another code of conduct, Councillor Turnbull, because he's no longer an elected member, so we can't do another code of conduct for non-payment, and it's only a request anyway. So I am rather torn which way I'm going to go with this, because I can see both sides of the argument. You know, I'll wait until I hear a few more words, I think.
Councillor Lem.
Yes, I too am torn with this. There's no doubt in my mind that Councillor Carbone did the wrong thing, and Councillor Carbone actually did incur, by his behaviour, the extra costs that we have. But on the other hand, he resigned, and that would have hurt him. And also, you know, in terms of future costs, his reputation has taken a big hit and will continue to absolutely haunt him for many years to come. And I feel in a lot of ways like I'm presuming that we keep the salary that he would have got. So the allowance, I beg your pardon, the allowance that he would have had. So it's not as if we're completely out of pocket. And I think that I do agree that we haven't been consistent in the application of this, and perhaps we need to have some sort of policy, or maybe the next council needs a policy about how you deal with people that have a code of conduct that unnecessarily delay or obfuscate the matter, and maybe we need to do that. But in this instance, I feel that it can rebound on us because some people might see this as going a bit too, like a bit of a witch hunt. And I don't want this council to have that sort of accusation levelled at it, because I suspect it could come very quickly from former Councillor Carbone, because he did try and present himself as a victim. And I don't want to give him the opportunity to present himself as a victim. He did the wrong thing. He never truly, properly admitted doing the wrong thing, but he has worn this in terms of reputational damage and the fact that being a councillor was something he loved, and it's been taken away from him and for probably a good many years to come. So I don't know that us doing this is anything other than just a bit of a a slap as he goes out the door. I'm interested in what other people have got to say about it.
Councillor Davey, you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, we keep hearing about all these codes of conduct that have been a feature of this council. Can someone, I mean, you don't have to identify them. Sorry?
I can whisper in your ear.
Well, I'm not aware of them. And I mean, can someone tell me how many there are and what the costs have been, please?
I don't have the information to hand, Madam Mayor. I'd have to go through our records.
Councillor Pickett.
I came into...
What's the answer?
He doesn't have it at hand.
Can that be sent to us? Sorry, can I have a follow-up question? Sorry.
Well, I have already asked Councillor Pickett to speak, so I'll come back to you with another question.
I came into this debate not sure. Having listened to the debate, I think the answer is to vote this down. I do think that the point that Councillor Davis has made is right. I too share the disappointment in various decisions that Councillor Carbone took, which certainly cost us more money than it needed to. It cost sort of him and us more reputation points than it perhaps needed to. I think that's right, but at the end of the day, we can only request it. He probably won't pay it, so he probably won't be any further along. I think I wasn't at the meeting that considered the code of conduct. I did watch it. I did feel actually it was handled very well and made the point that night in respect of our disappointment around Councillor Carbone's actions, and his subsequent resignation, I guess, reinforces that. Certainly, if we're looking at a level of suffering, I suspect he has suffered significantly, as Councillor Lemon said. It's very important to him, his public life. And so, not that's a reason not to get costs that should be ours, but I just don't think we will here. I don't think we are. I think we're probably just being a step too far, probably, for just proving a point. I don't think there's money involved, to be honest. We request, he doesn't pay it. My memory of most times when we request things, they don't get done. There's no legal compulsion. And so I think, I actually don't have a problem with Councillor Davis raising it. I think it certainly needed to be debated. I think that the amount of money he's suggesting is right because that was add-on costs. But I do think the practical thing is to vote it down and move on.
Councillor Davey, you can now ask a subsequent question.
Thank you. If this was approved, agreed to, if Councillor Carbone decided down the track to run again as a candidate for office in City of Burnside, would that preclude him from being able to run? Money owing to council?
Through Madam Mayor, I'll just have a glance across at Krishma. So the answer is no, wouldn't preclude him. However, yeah.
Sorry, if there's no one else who wishes to speak, I'll go back to Councillor Davis.
Thank you, councillors, for your consideration and your debate in, I'm sure, is what a very difficult motion. And including, I had many of the thoughts that you've raised tonight before putting it. This is simply a request for the monies to be repaid. And when this motion was moved a month ago by this council to ask for this report, we did not have his resignation at that time, nor did we have an apology at that time. Each code of conduct and the penalty proposed by council rises and falls on its own merits. The option to ask for reimbursement of legal fees is always, and has always been, an option in every single code of conduct that we've heard in the past, and will always be an option into the future. At the time of moving the penalty or the request that this council undertook, we did not move to ask at that time for a reimbursement of legal fees. It's not about precedence, it's about the penalty that we set. And many different codes of conduct have many different outcomes. Some require no action, some require training, some require expulsion or suspension. and those actions don't set a precedent for the next. They should each rise and fall on their own merits. It is certainly clear that the legal costs incurred in this code of conduct have been a significant aggravation to our community and to our ratepayers. And if you remember the comments and the calls and emails, perhaps you've received them, I certainly did, there was significant angst from the community regarding legal fees. I'm glad that we could debate this motion tonight, so we could consider it to show our community that we have turned our minds to whether we should recoup these legal costs. And I do hope that you will support this motion, but I also understand why you might not.
Those in favour, please raise your hands. Those against? The motion is lost.
I think it'd be nice if Council did move the motion, just to demonstrate the fact that we did provide a report as requested.
Councillor Hughes wishes to do that.
Happy to second.
And Councillor Cornish is seconding it. All those in favour?
Oh, can I?
Sorry. I'm just going to get that. We just want just that the report be received. And that's what you wanted to say, and moved and seconded.
And I have a question.
All right, that's fine. What's written on there you're happy with? Yep. Mover and seconder?
Can I have a question, please, Madam Mayor?
All right.
My question for the administration is just to confirm that the complainant has been written to and some engagement has happened with that person to with the sentiment of our council's what we want to say sadness that such an event has happened, or words to that effect. I'm sure you've done such a letter.
Through Madam Mayor, I can report that the Council's recommendation has been implemented in full, and a letter in the frame that you've mentioned, Councillor Anstey, has been sent.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour?
Hang on.
Sorry.
Before we finish with this motion,
yes.
I've actually got a question as a follow-up.
Sorry, okay, apologies.
I beg your pardon, but it's just quite important to me, actually. It was very important to me that when a letter was sent from this council to the complainant, that the complainant was made aware the entire council was behind the sentiments of the letter that was being sent. Is that what happened? It was not just the mayor, it was all of us. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Through Madam Mayor, yes, all the thoughts and sentiments that were raised with me, and that was one of them, were incorporated into the correspondence.
Right, so now can I put the motion? All those in favour? Against? Carried.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll move the motion. I'll read it out. The council seeks to install a fence between... Not even for those at home? No? Okay. Thank you. As we've heard tonight, there are 8 homes which front onto Kooyong Court, which is a very quiet cul-de-sac. They have their homes facing the court, and that's their address. And there are then 7 or 8 homes whose back gates and fences back onto the reserve, and they all have gates and come and go through the reserve regularly. It's a very small community who look out for each other as they come and go. They advise me, as we've heard tonight, that they do not want to be subjected to overt scrutiny from a homeowner who has chosen to open his living room directly onto the reserve, and who they allege uses his space, or the family uses the space as their own, mows the lawns, waters the lawns, and they believe has cameras scanning the reserve. The family has had a pretty fair go in terms of using the access from the reserve to build their home. All the other homes that were the subject of that, or the result of that subdivision, there were 5 homes in all. The other 4 that back onto the reserve have all installed good neighbour fences with gates onto the reserve. Council has planted around that with, as you will recall, the petition that many of the residents put to council for planting in the reserve, because much of it had died when the irrigation system was turned off by council in the drought. Therefore, the grass died, and there were a whole lot of implications of that. The new homeowner rightly wanted to improve the area, and there's nothing wrong with that. He probably went a bit overboard with grassing it and mowing it himself. And then, as some of the community around have alleged, monopolising the space so that they feel excluded from it. I hope you'll support including the council install a fence at that site. I don't think it's appropriate, and there is only one other reserve in Burnside that has no fence onto a reserve that I know of. I'm happy to be corrected with any other addresses that anyone can provide. But this is a very unusual circumstance where someone actually has built their living space right at the border of their property to capitalise on a reserve. And I think it's to the detriment of the rest of the community around the reserve, and I think it's will be an unfortunate precedent if we support this. So I hope you will support the motion which was drafted by the staff and which I'm putting before you tonight. Thank you.
I seek a seconder. Councillor Turnbull, you wish to speak now?
Yes, please. Yeah, the issue of fencing between properties and reserves has been debated before in council. I'm in favour of fencing. It provides a delineated line between the two. Without a fence line, there's confusion. A few years down the track, a few more owners, who knows? We've seen the angst and confusion and cost of no dividing fence in Moorcroft Avenue. And anyone can see the advantages of the property on Glenburn Road having no fence between it and Harris Reserve. It makes the property look bigger, more space for residents, a better resale value in a way. The previous report stated no one person has the rights to use a reserve than another. So this resident of 6 Tusmore Avenue, he shouldn't be able to use the council land as his own. He states that he's got some planter boxes to plant camouflaging trees. Well, I've seen these planters, and they won't withstand the larger trees he wants to use as a screen. And then he says, 1 metre high. Well, so what? That's not going to be much of a screen. I'm sorry. They will be dead within a year, says a horticulturalist. So I will vote for this one because I don't think it's right. It's not his, it belongs to all the residents. He needs to comply with a fence like the other residents have. So yes, I will support it. Thank you.
Councillor Henschke.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Yes, I agree with Councillor Turnbull, Councillor Davey. It is a reserve, and I am actually concerned about liability the other way around. If council doesn't delineate its park to a resident and things happen in this park, you know, it's not helpful. So we have to either have a low, low fence, posts or something to say you are now in a park to these people. Here it's suggested, 1.3 suggests the fence is constructed from a good neighbour fence materials. Well, maybe that or something more aesthetic, I don't know, but I do believe council does need to delineate and define a park, its boundaries, at a minimum. And at the moment, we have an owner planting grass and growing it, and which is really, a great contribution, but I wouldn't want them to hurt themselves in our park while they're doing that. Thank you.
Councillor Piggott.
I have a couple of questions. Could you tell me how many metres back from the building their boundary comes? Does anyone know that? I'm sorry if it's in there.
Through Madam Mayor, Mr. Cant, I just can't recall the measurement from the boundary to the back deck or wall.
Through your worship, it's a metre at the most.
At the most, less than a metre probably, right. And the second thing, the planned planter boxes, they were to be on the boundary. I guess they have to be if he's only got a metre. Was that the idea? The planter boxes would sit on the boundary delineating the properties?
Through Madam Mayor, I can only interpret what they said this evening, and they made a comment about not encroaching on the reserve with the growth of the foliage. So I'd have to assume, without being tested, that they're sitting just inside their boundary.
Right.
Through your worship, when we met with them on site, they explained that they have actually designed the edge of the decking, which goes to the edge of the boundary, to allow for the planter boxes to sit on the deck, so it would just be inside their boundary.
And one last one, if I could, is there anything in administration, Barry's obviously dealt with this already, is there anything else that, short of a fence, that we could talk them into doing or ask them to do or force them to do that would help this problem? The windows didn't seem to be it was included in the CEO response, but it didn't seem to actually be didn't help our side. Is there anything else?
Through me, I might just get Mr. Cant, perhaps to just share with us the theme or the manner of the conversation that unfolded.
That's a good idea.
Through your worship, the CEO report probably talks through the process, the CEO comment within the motion on notice probably talks through the majority of the process that we undertook. I've met with the residents on 2 occasions now, following the request from the ward councillors to see if there was anything that we could do. There was a report that was presented to council a few months ago that actually talked about the legality of whether fences can be put in or place or not. So we've covered off on that. The general feedback from the residents were that they have designed their house in accordance with our approvals and also advice of the teams to protect the tree at the front, to maximise the area around that tree and that garden at the back, and knowing full well that legally they're not required to put up a fence. Having said that, they are cognizant of people's concerns about seeing in, so they did suggest that if a film over the windows were required, they would certainly be happy to do that. They are looking to divide the property a little bit more by putting planter boxes in place. I'm not sure about the concerns about them using the reserve as their own property, as my understanding is they access it like anyone in that street or area can access it. It's a community reserve and they use it accordingly. There's no built structures over that reserve. It was a condition following the development they actually reinstate that grass because there was a lot of access through that area. And I am aware, like many homeowners do throughout the city, that they do maintain the grass, like many verges are maintained by property owners as well.
Councillor Davey, you have a question?
Thank you. Yes, I've got a couple of questions. In the deputation tonight, they said that they had been facilitated by our planners in the design of their home, and that they were, it seemed to be inferred that they did not need, they could build right up to the boundary and that they did not need fencing. Can we be advised what conditions were placed on them and what the usual conditions are in terms of planning and development approvals on council reserves? And then I have a second question.
Through Madam Mayor, I might just get a comment from Mr. Cooper, particularly just around the legal aspects of the rear fence.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, I can confirm that the requirement to place a fence or to replace the fence that was removed was in fact not a requirement. In terms of the other conditions, any other conditions, I'd have to take that on notice. I haven't got that with me this evening.
Follow-up question, why is that not included, that a fence needs replacing for the one that was there? And two, does council give approval for, which I'm amazed at, does council give approval for homes construction exercises to be undertaken through their reserves? Is this just turning a blind eye, or is this actual approval given?
Through the Mayor, the answer to the second part of your questions involves a 221 permit, which is fairly common practice when access is required for certain developments. I can't confirm, I'm afraid, whether one was provided in this case, but I can get back to you take the question on notice and do that. In terms of the details of the fence, or lack of, in this particular development, again, I'd have to take that on notice and get back to you.
Councillor Dawes?
Yeah, I'd just like to make a couple of comments here. When you have neighbour versus neighbour, that normally happens in a CAT meeting and you've got to make a call. And with this one, I just want us to try and mediate a solution. I really do. I do accept Councillor Turnbull, which says that the screen by those planter boxes might be 1 metre high, but surely we can talk to them about getting bigger planter boxes and planting higher shrubs and so forth. But, for us to say we're going to put a fence there, I don't know if that's a solution. I found the couple tonight from 6 Tusmore Avenue were trying to help, trying to find a solution. And if they weren't so helpful, and I thought they were honest with us, to be honest, I'd have a different view, but I think there's room to manoeuvre here, offer more suggestions, a higher or a bigger planter box, higher shrubs, and we might find a solution.
Councillor Davis?
Thank you. What I would propose is that we vote this motion down, and I do have an alternative motion, which I believe would be the right answer. So I'm very conflicted in this, in that they've built their house around preserving a significant tree. Geez, we've got to give them a lot of credit for that. That's an excellent thing. It's what we do. That's what we're asking our community to do on a regular basis, to then go and say, we're going to chuck up, like this is their main dining room, to then chuck up a fence 1 metre from that, completely obscure the entire design of the house, when they relied, I'm guessing, potentially, on communication with the council as to the design of the property. That's not a good outcome, right? So I don't think that forcing the fence to go in is the right outcome. So what I'd be proposing is that the CEO write to the owners to requesting a detailed plan which will also address the concerns of other residents. And the main concerns of the other residents to me seem to be overlooking the reserve and impinging on other residents' ability to freely use the reserve in an unviewed way, or in a casual way, so they don't feel pressure. Secondly, the CCTV cameras also give that inference of control and oppressiveness over what should be public space. And then thirdly, creating a clear delineation between the rear of the house and the park. And so to my mind, if we can address the issues where it obstructs the view of the windows, where we can create a clear delineation between the house and the reserve, and also deal with the CCTV cameras, I do believe that that will significantly reduce the amount of anxiousness that the community feel when they're using that particular part of the reserve. And I would also suggest that it could actually be a star picket, a couple of star pickets with a single wire across it. So then that way there's a clear difference between what is a reserve and what is then private property. And my next point would be that the CEO continue to monitor the situation as to any encroachments. It's very difficult, and I don't think we want to pit the community against each other, but the owners of number 6 Tusmore Avenue, I believe, have done a great service to the community. But I do feel that what is creating the level of anxiousness is the inability for, or the feeling that other residents get that that park is no longer available, that they can't come right up to their boundary. So residents should feel the ability to go right up to the boundary, sit underneath, right next to their border, and feel comfortable there. And that's what public space is. So I recognise both sides. But I think to the residents who are perhaps watching this motion here and going, well, why aren't you putting in a colour-bond fence? Well, we must give credit to those residents who are actually looking to preserve significant trees and preserve our tree canopy. That is something that the City of Burnside Council values so much, and I think particularly our conversations with them in the past. So I would be proposing that alternative. Now, this isn't to say that if this doesn't work that we can't then revisit this. So what I'd be suggesting to the CEO is that he negotiate to open a dialogue with number 6 Tusmore Avenue, address those main concerns, revisit the deputations and speak what are the main concerns and feelings there, and find a way to mediate, as Councillor Dawes has said. And that's what I believe would become the result of this motion. So my suggestion would be to vote this down, propose the alternative as a motion without notice, and then if this is unworkable, Councillor Davies' motion I think should come back to Council, and we should proceed along that line. But I would like that interim step.
Right, it is 10:24 and a half, and we need to extend time in order to complete this particular motion. I'm not suggesting we move any further in the meeting, but I have 5 people on my list here who haven't, 4 who haven't spoken yet, and 1 who wishes to ask further questions. So I think we need to extend time because we cannot finish in the next 6 minutes.
I can't speak because it's on myself, but can I suggest that we finish this one, but extend it to 10:45 at the latest.
That's what I was going to recommend. And that might hopefully curtail people who wish to speak, knowing that we've got a deadline. I know it's unfair, but otherwise we finish right now.
I'm happy to vote for that.
Sorry?
She seconded.
What's that?
She seconded. 10:45.
10:45? Okay, I wasn't clear as to what you were voting for. So
Yeah,
in support, 10:45 finish, seconded by you.
No.
All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's sufficient. Okay. Right, 10:45 stop. Or earlier if this finishes earlier.
Yep.
So the next person to speak is Councillor Piggott.
That's right, hence the hurry. Look, we need to vote this down. I think it'd be totally unacceptable, actually, if we took action to put a 1.5 metre minimum fence, less than a metre from the front of that house. In all circumstances, actually, there must be a better result that we can pull here. But in the circumstances where they have abided by our planning permissions, maybe even taken advice from our staff, it just would not be acceptable. I think we are caught here between personalities of neighbours, and I guess we've all been caught in those situations. It's so frustrating. They are very hard to fix. I do think a mediation, perhaps Councillor Davis's view or alternate motion, I think is something where we should try and go to get some sort of movement. I do like the idea of the planter boxes without sharing the same pessimism of Councillor Turnbull, but without the same knowledge of horticulture. I do think that is something we should go for. But we cannot vote this up. We must vote this down. We can't, as a council, put a 1.5 metre fence less than a metre from what they are saying is the front of their house. It would be outrageous. We have another international media story.
Councillor Lemon.
Thank you. They are saying it's the front of their house, and therein lies the issue for me. They are saying it's the front of their house. Their backyard, they've probably got the hills hoist in what other people would call the front of their yard, and their backyard actually holds 150 to 200-year-old river red gum. And I just think that, I have to say, I listened very carefully to the deputations, and then when the people in question, the people under scrutiny came before us, I felt so sorry for them. Here we have a young couple who have bought a piece of land in a new development. This is their home. The exciting thing of building a home. They've saved a tree. They have got their front room looking over a reserve. And why wouldn't you if you could? Why wouldn't you? Would any one of us do the same thing? Yes, we would. All of us would do the same thing. So, they've come in, and I cannot help but feeling this is me, who wasn't born in Australia, who came to this country with parents, with a mother that had no English. I actually feel that this young couple are the new Australians of Kooyong Court, and that's how they're being treated. I truly, in my heart, believe that this is what's happening here, and I think it's wrong. They cannot be discriminated against because they're the newbies on the block. They cannot. They cannot be discriminated against because they've done the right thing by saving a tree. They cannot be discriminated against because the design of their house is actually such that their backyard is their front yard. This is the next generation that are going to have children, that have got a forever home probably on that court. And we're talking about making them put up an ugly fence within a metre of their beautiful design. It's wrong. I think it's so wrong. It's discriminatory, it's victimising, and it's wrong. And I won't support this.
Councillor Cornish.
Thank you, Worship. I suppose I've got a question to begin with, because I know there are a number of properties around the city around our city that abut reserves, and they've actually got see-through fences like tubular fencing or wire fencing, so they can actually see the reserve. I know there's at least 3 or 4 around Tusmore Avenue that abut, and they look right onto the reserve. There's one on Hazelwood Park in the corner by the olive trees. They've got a fence that you can see through. It's not a neighbourhood fence. There's one over in Eastwood. Could they replace this fence with a see-through fence if we put this up and pay for it 100%, and they're meeting all the acts? Like if this gets up, we put up a fence, they take it down and put up a new fence at their cost that they can see through. Is that something that they can do?
Councillor Davey, you have...
Oh, I thought I was going.
No, sorry.
Through your worship, if council amended this wording of this motion to allow that to happen, then yes, that could happen. However, with the motion that's before you, which talks about the colour-bond fence, that's the process that we would have to follow. But yes, any type of fence or boundary, I don't know, anything on the boundary could be relevant for this situation.
Councillor Davey?
My question relates to the filming aspect, which is what is really upsetting people, feeling they're being filmed. And I'd like to know what rights council has got to stop the filming of council property. They're talking about security and all of that sort of stuff. That's fine in their property. But when they are filming activities in a reserve from their property, what can we do about that?
Through Madam Mayor, I seem to recall we got some advice on this. Was it Mr. Cooper? And that, by that look tells me I might have been incorrect. I just wonder whether we had an understanding of what the rules were around having surveillance cameras.
I'm not sure. We'd have to check if there was anything particularly about CCTV. But certainly, if you extrapolate that to using cameras or phones in public parks, then I'm not sure how far that will actually go. But again, we'll take it on notice and come back to the chamber.
Councillor Cornish?
Sorry, another question. Regarding the CCTV, because I know a resident was doing this in Michael Perry Reserve, gave me footage of all the kids walking through because there was an issue up there at the time. We did get that advice at the time, and it is a public place, so anyone can have cameras pointed to a public park and be recording. And take photographs. Yes.
Actually, no, just one. Sorry, I will. Just, can I have a question, please? Could I please ask if a council arborist could talk to them about a tree line rather than planter boxes? a line of trees that go to about 3 metres, but they can see through them because they might lose their leaves in winter.
They can't do that. Their deck goes to their boundary.
We could plant them.
We could plant them on our side of the...
Alternative planting in their boxes might be an alternative, might be a good idea, if you're concerned about that. Anyway, Councillor Hughes, you wish to speak?
I was just going to speak. It's in my ward, so I feel like I should say something. But I think Councillor Davis has presented a reasonable alternative to run an alternate motion. I think the staff, from what I understand, have had conversations with the residents. I did drive past the property again today. I can see from both sides of the fence, essentially, where everyone's coming from.
There is no fence.
There is no fence. That's the joke. No, I'm not on this fence. But I do think if we can give these residents the opportunity to work with us, we might get a better outcome than just going in and essentially ending up with something that they then take us to court or fight. Let's at least start with a position that we collaborate with, and then if we don't get an outcome, then let's come back and revisit. But I think if Councillor Davis has something, then we might be able to look at that.
I'm going to suggest that whatever motion, if this, depending on the outcome of the vote, that we leave this until the next council meeting. All right, I will go back to Councillor Davey, who moved the motion to begin with.
Thank you. Thank you for all your interest. I think we do need, this discussion has been going on for months and months and months. It was actually the staff who crafted this email, this motion on notice for me, and asked that I bring it to council for it to be deliberated on and debated as the best way for us to solve this problem.
Do you want to interrupt? Sorry, Councillor, the CEO wants to interrupt.
Sorry, I just want to provide some clarity for the chamber. Officers were not intending to bring this to the chamber. I just want to be clear, it was at your wish, Councillor Davey, to find a resolution, and this was the best way for you to try and achieve that. I just want to be clear.
Thank you. This was the recommendation that was made to me after months of discussions with the CEO and his staff about how we resolve this issue. The negotiations have been going on for months and not getting anywhere. So I would ask that you support this. I think we should proceed with this notice as we would in any other case where there's a fence which needs to be replaced. Remember, this wasn't in the ether. There was actually a fence there that had been there for many, many years. I know all of the deliberations we've heard about, the discussions we've heard about the planning and development and the saving of the tree. I think there were alternatives that could have been followed. I think it's a very unusual and not a good precedent to set for someone to turn their house around and have their front of the house and back. I think they've got 2 bites at the cherry. They've got a supreme, wonderful spot. It's a family home, but I don't really think they should be able to benefit from both ends of their property at the expense of other establishments, about 16 other properties that surround them. So I think in terms of fairness and equity, I would ask that you support this. We allow the staff to negotiate with all of their skills to get suitable fencing, and we've heard some solutions put tonight, or other plantings that we plant on our land, so that we actually soften this whole outlook and ameliorate the intrusion that the rest of the community feel around this home, and hopefully that way would manage this situation. So hopefully you'll support this. Thank you.
I put the motion. Those in favour? Those against? Motion is lost. Division has been called, so those who support the motion, please stand. Councillor Davey and Councillor Turnbull. Against, Councillor Cornish, Hughes, Piggott, Davis, Lemon, Dawes and Hubel. Right, those other motions that remain on the table will be until next time. Councillor Henschke was going to withdraw hers tonight, said it wasn't ready. I would have liked to have got mine through because I do feel it's urgent that that letter gets sent off, but I can't send it without your permission. So, are you happy for me to jump the queue and get that through?
We can just move it. I'm happy to move with the motion.
You're happy to
We can
move the motion?
motion?
Okay. All right, move to 13.4. Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Is there anyone who wishes to speak specifically on that matter?
No.
I like to think it was self-explanatory. We've had 2 letters of 2014, 2018, so I'm going to put the motion. Seconder? Sorry.
No, I do have a query for you.
Okay, go ahead.
In terms of potentially extra safety, moving the toll gate, is that an option? Like they're moving the other building down the road, the toll gate building, they might have to move that. Is that an option, like heritage-wise?
No, from my perspective, but that's not the detail that we'll be going into in relation to the letters that we send. Yeah. There was consideration of putting a rest bed in the middle, but crazy idea. That's not where we're going to go. Anyway, I'd like you second it. Thank you, Councillor Cornish. All those in favour? Against? Carried. And I do thank you for your support on that matter. I think it is really important. So, yes, go ahead.
Just before we...
We now adjourn this business so it's there at the front at the next meeting. So this will be
no.
adjourned.
We need someone to...
No, we've got
move
the
that way.
confidentials as well.
And we've got the confidentials.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm
But
just,
are they able to be held at the
seeking some advice, Madam Mayor.
Through the Mayor, the items can't be adjourned because they're not currently under debate.
What? Sorry?
The items cannot be adjourned because they're not currently under debate. They can be deferred.
Yes.
Yeah.
All items, including confidential items,
Be tabled at the front of the agenda
at
for
the
the
front
next
of the
meeting.
agenda for the next meeting.
We can run a motion to that effect.
So do I need to put that as a motion? So I put that as a motion. All items, including confidential items, will go to the front of the agenda at the next meeting. Sit in your chair, Henry.
Through the Mayor, question for Councillor Lemon. Would you like to start the meeting earlier than the 7 o'clock?
No.
Just to ensure we
I don't.
finish.
I don't wish to start it earlier. I wish to start it at 7 and be efficient.
Okay, sounds good.
They'll have to learn to live with it. Carried.